1968. Vietnam. Dense jungle, suffocating heat, and a squad of American soldiers forcing their way through the foliage toward an enemy outpost somewhere in North Vietnam. At their head was First Lieutenant Peter Randall, ordering his men to keep quiet and keep moving. Before long, the squad came upon a village that appeared deserted at first glance. Inside one of the houses, they discovered an open cellar and descended below. One of the soldiers noticed a strange box covered in unfamiliar symbols that resembled Russian lettering, though none of them could make out what it said. Ignoring orders, he picked it up and opened it. The explosion tore him apart. The underground chamber erupted into chaos. Two of the soldiers encountered a group of Vietnamese fighters, and Randall immediately hurled a phosphorus grenade into their position. One man survived, bleeding heavily. Randall looked him in the eyes and told him that they had come to free his people from the threat of the communist plague. There was no honor in what followed. They had come, killed, and taken what they wanted. War was merciless. Once the area had been secured, Randall prepared to call for extraction, but two Army helicopters suddenly appeared overhead. Lieutenant General Stilwell emerged from one of them, approached Randall, and informed him without ceremony that he was being reassigned. Randall asked what would happen to his men. Stilwell gave no answer. He simply drew his pistol and killed them. Those were his orders. Then he returned to the helicopter. Roughly a year later, Randall was sent on another mission with a new squad. Their objective was to extract a researcher who was still alive and hidden inside a bunker beneath Hope, Idaho. They landed outside the town and advanced inward, immediately noticing the unnatural silence. There were no people, no voices, no signs of life at all. As they passed a grocery store, they looked through the windows and saw dozens of corpses inside, as though the townspeople had slaughtered one another. Moments later, Randall ordered his men to prepare for combat. More than 20 infected creatures had gathered on the rooftops above them, huge, malformed things that immediately charged. Gunfire tore through the streets as Randall ordered the squad to hold its ground. The mission carried black-level clearance. They would either reach the objective or die in Hope. The situation quickly deteriorated. There were too many infected, forcing the soldiers to retreat while detonating vehicles behind them and using the resulting walls of flame to slow the pursuit. Following their map, they located the bunker entrance and descended through a sewer access point into the concealed facility. Dozens of bodies lay outside the laboratory entrance. They belonged to people who had tried to bypass the bunker's security systems, only to be killed by neurotoxic gas. The corpses had to be moved before Randall's team could reach the door. Inside, the researcher they had been sent to recover waited nervously for rescue, surrounded by incubation chambers that appeared to contain developing infected specimens. Once the bodies had been dragged aside and the sealed door cut open, Randall forced his way inside. The disturbance awakened the creatures in the chambers. They broke free, and the laboratory became a killing ground. Most of the soldiers were killed, along with the researcher. One of the surviving men recovered a case containing an ampule, the real objective of the mission. The remaining soldiers fled deeper into the facility, turned a corner, and stopped. Dozens of infected pregnant women stood ahead of them and began advancing. After a brutal firefight, the squad killed them and continued onward. The next room reeked of a sharp, overpowering odor. It was filled with laboratory animals. Dead monkeys were scattered across the floor, while others remained locked inside cages. One macaque suddenly broke loose and attacked, killing another soldier before being shot. Sometime later, Randall was contacted by Sergeant Sam Hendricks, who was stationed with the remaining Blackwatch soldiers assigned to observe Hope during the experiment. Hendricks provided a new extraction point, the local hospital, where intelligence indicated that Elizabeth Greene was being held. The problem was that the infected had formed a living barrier around the building, protecting her. Randall's squad forced its way through. Grenades, flamethrowers, and sustained machine gun fire cut down the infected one after another as Randall personally led the assault. Inside the hospital, he found Greene, only 19 years old. She resisted violently, driven by the need to protect the child she had just given birth to. When Randall attempted to take her son, the child, who would later receive the codename PARIAH, Greene bit deeply into his arm, exposing him directly to the virus. Randall reacted immediately. In the hospital corridor, he found a butcher's cleaver and amputated his own arm below the elbow before the infection could spread. The Purge of Hope would later become known as Operation Altruistic. Hope had never truly been what it appeared to be. Officially, it was a project designed to create a self-sufficient settlement capable of surviving a nuclear war. In reality, the town was a controlled testing ground for a biological weapon. People of different ages, professions, and backgrounds were drawn there by promises of better jobs and living conditions. The virus was disguised as a harmless substance intended to simulate radioactive fallout, and the residents willingly participated in the trials, allowing themselves to be injected. The project began on June 11, 1964. A total of 461 test subjects were exposed to DX1118, a strain of the red light virus. For more than 2.5 years, the infection appeared to have no measurable effect. By August 8, 1968, however, the strain carried by Elizabeth Greene had spread throughout Hope and taken control of its population, reducing the residents to mindless hosts whose sole purpose was to protect her. The children born in Hope after the initial exposure were also part of the experiment. Their parents had been deliberately infected and then allowed to return home. In total, 27 children were conceived under these conditions. 14 pregnancies were terminated before birth, while the remaining children did not survive beyond the age of 3. None of them were entirely normal. Some displayed abnormal reactions to their environment, while others exhibited unusual changes in their DNA. The virus appeared to be attempting to create something new, but each attempt ended in failure. After the children died, their bodies were not buried. They were preserved for future research. Only one child survived, Elizabeth Greene's son, codenamed PARIAH. He was one of the primary subjects Blackwatch sought to recover. Greene herself had not been infected by chance. She was originally from Hope, having moved there with her father in 1967. Soon afterward, she became involved with a local group of young hippies and befriended a man named Steve. Greene and several other teenagers eventually discovered an unfinished research bunker south of Hope and entered the facility. Their presence was quickly detected by the personnel overseeing the project, and the intruders were detained. It was later discovered that Greene possessed an extraordinary compatibility with the virus. Unlike the other subjects, the infection did not destroy her. Her body adapted to it. Greene became capable of producing new viral strains within her own organism. She resisted the effects that had killed or deformed countless other subjects and generated a new strain, one of 14 eventually identified. The infection transformed her body into a living factory for lethal viruses and granted her superhuman abilities. Her biology changed completely. Her aging appeared to stop, and while she displayed none of the degenerative effects common among other infected humans, her body continued producing new strains every day, constantly evolving into something different. Greene became the center of the outbreak. Hope effectively transformed into a massive hive, with every infected resident acting to protect her. Elizabeth Greene and her newborn son were eventually captured. Greene was transferred to Ward F at Fort Detrick, where she remained under strict containment for 9 years and 2 months. PARIAH was separated from his mother and transferred to Vandenberg Air Force Base, where he became the subject of further Blackwatch experiments. In the years that followed, Dr. Raymond McMullen founded Gentek and became increasingly involved in Blackwatch's genetic research. His work would eventually lead to Project Blacklight, an attempt to weaponize and further develop the discoveries made through red light. Meanwhile, Peter Randall continued rising through the ranks. By 1978, he had assumed command of Blackwatch, first as a major and eventually as a general. Blackwatch officially did not exist. It was neither a conventional military branch nor an ordinary intelligence or law enforcement agency. It operated beyond public scrutiny and outside the restrictions imposed on conventional organizations. Blackwatch had been created in 1962 through cooperation between DARPA and the United States Department of the Army. Its original purpose was protection against biological warfare, but that mandate soon expanded into biological weapons research and development. Blackwatch created the red light virus and employed it in programs such as Carnival 1, which focused primarily on animal testing, and Carnival 2, which expanded the experiments to human subjects. Following the disaster at Hope and Operation Altruistic, Blackwatch formally shifted its priorities toward identifying, containing, and eliminating viral outbreaks wherever they occurred. Much of its scientific research was eventually transferred to Gentek, while Blackwatch itself remained an operational force outside the conventional military structure. Blackwatch possessed access to heavy military equipment, experimental weapons, specialized units, aircraft, chemical agents, and extensive intelligence resources. During biological emergencies, its authority superseded that of conventional military and civilian organizations. Its containment doctrine permitted extreme measures, including the destruction of populated areas and the elimination of civilians whenever commanders considered such actions necessary to prevent an outbreak from spreading. In 1998, another Blackwatch operation began in Antarctica. Operation Ice Storm was led by U.S. Army Lieutenant Robert Cross, a soldier who would later become one of Blackwatch's most important operatives. Cross and his men were ordered to enter an isolated underground settlement known as Springfield and recover its lead scientist, Dr. Mathieu Doublé, after contact with the facility had been lost. Springfield had been constructed deep beneath Antarctica during the Cold War. Officially, it had housed Soviet defectors, prisoners, scientists, KGB personnel, and their families. In reality, the facility had also been used as another testing ground connected to red light research. Cross and his unit entered Springfield through an old elevator. From the moment they reached the underground settlement, they encountered complete silence. The streets and buildings appeared abandoned, evoking the conditions Blackwatch had encountered decades earlier in Hope. Cross divided his men into two teams, Rio and Bravo, and ordered them to sweep the settlement. Rio team soon discovered enormous quantities of animal waste mixed with human remains. Cross knew that Springfield contained a zoo and concluded that some of the animals had probably escaped. The situation rapidly deteriorated. One of the teams was attacked by a swarm of infected birds that descended on the soldiers and tore into them. Flamethrowers were used to drive the creatures back, but the attack was only the beginning. Mutated predators soon emerged from the settlement. Infected tigers and other animals charged the soldiers, overwhelming them and tearing through the unit. Contact with Bravo team was lost, leaving Cross and the survivors of Rio team isolated. Cross ordered his remaining men to retreat towards Springfield's infrastructure and prepare to destroy the entire settlement. The mission had become a containment operation. If the infected could not be eliminated directly, Springfield itself would be destroyed. One by one, Cross's men were killed. Only Cross and one other soldier managed to reach the elevator, but before they could escape, an infected lion attacked Cross's remaining companion. Cross killed the creature and carried the wounded soldier toward the surface, but he was ultimately the only member of the unit to survive the operation. General Peter Randall was waiting for him above. Randall revealed that the Springfield mission had served another purpose. It had been Cross's initiation into Blackwatch. The deaths of the soldiers had been considered acceptable losses. Cross had survived an encounter with a red light outbreak and demonstrated that he possessed the qualities Blackwatch required. Cross detonated the explosives. Springfield was destroyed, along with the infected creatures inside it. Following Operation Ice Storm, Robert Cross became a member of Blackwatch and would eventually rise to the rank of captain and become one of the organization's most capable operatives. Decades of research into red light, the experiments at Hope, the creation of Gentek, and Project Blacklight would eventually converge around one man, Dr. Alexander J. Mercer. It is difficult to say exactly where Alexander J. Mercer's story begins, with his birth or with the moment he died. Alexander J. Mercer was born in New York City. His childhood offered little stability. He spent the first 9 years of his life moving between orphanages and foster homes. When he was 10, he was finally returned to his biological mother, who had been incarcerated since his birth. She was supposed to take her son back and give him the chance to begin a normal life, but Mercer later remembered his years in foster care as more peaceful. His father had largely disappeared from his life after separating from his mother and effectively ceased to exist as far as Alex was concerned. Not long afterward, his younger sister Dana was born. Her arrival became one of the defining events of Alex's life. Dana became the person he cared about more than anyone else, and as they grew older, Alex gradually assumed an almost parental role in her life. They spent much of their childhood together, playing and watching horror films, and their relationship provided Alex with one of the few genuine emotional connections he ever had. From an early age, Mercer developed a strong interest in science. After graduating from school, he attended Columbia University in New York, studying genetics and virology before earning a doctorate in genetics. As an adult, he remained intensely withdrawn. He trusted almost no one, maintained few meaningful relationships, cared little about the opinions of others, and devoted most of his life to his work. His abilities soon attracted the attention of Gentek, which hired him as a researcher. Mercer advanced rapidly through the company and eventually became the lead researcher of Project Blacklight. His team was tasked with engineering weaponized viruses from biological samples supplied by the government. Mercer became fascinated by the extraordinary complexity and adaptability of the material he was studying. The samples displayed remarkable characteristics, including biological mimicry and the ability to retain genetic information from infected hosts. Under Mercer's direction, the team eventually engineered an exceptionally virulent and powerful strain designated Blacklight. Mercer's exceptional skill in genetic engineering made him one of Gentek's most valuable scientists. His discoveries consistently placed his work years ahead of competing researchers. Even after he learned the true purpose of the project and understood that Blacklight was being developed as a biological weapon rather than for medical research, he continued working. Ethical considerations had little influence over his decisions. To Mercer, his responsibility was the science itself. His success eventually brought unwanted attention. Blackwatch began scrutinizing the Blacklight project more closely, while Gentek itself came under investigation by Congress. Subpoenas, investigations, and the possibility of criminal proceedings threatened to expose the program. Fearing that classified information would become public, Blackwatch decided to eliminate the evidence and the people connected to it. Mercer had always expected betrayal from those around him, and he quickly realized that something was wrong. Rather than trust Gentek or his superiors, he began conducting his own investigation. His sister Dana, who had developed considerable investigative skills through her work in journalism, helped him uncover the truth. People connected to Project Blacklight were being systematically eliminated. There were no trials and no public investigations. Researchers simply disappeared or were murdered before they could reveal what they knew. Aside from Dana, one of the few people with whom Mercer maintained a close personal relationship was Karen Parker, a fellow geneticist at Gentek and his former romantic partner. Karen had joined Gentek after Mercer and worked in genotyping under Raymond McMullen. Intelligent and determined, she became one of the few people Mercer trusted enough to discuss his growing suspicions. After discovering the true nature of Gentek's work and realizing the implications of what he himself had helped create, Mercer decided to expose the project. Karen initially supported him and agreed to help bring the information to light. At the last moment, however, she tried to stop him from leaving. Mercer refused and escaped, while Karen returned to the laboratory where she was arrested. Rather than torture or threaten her, Gentek offered her a deal. McMullen personally promised her freedom, a prestigious position, and the opportunity to begin a new life anywhere she chose. In exchange, she would help them capture Alex Mercer if he ever contacted her again. With little genuine choice available to her, Karen accepted. She was subsequently confined under surveillance in an apartment in central Manhattan. By then, Mercer was already running. He knew that Blackwatch was closing in and that he had very little time. He carried a drive containing information about the project and, more importantly, a vial of the Blacklight virus as insurance. He attempted to escape quietly through Pennsylvania Station, still hoping that he could leave the city before Blackwatch found him. They found him first. Cornered inside Penn Station, Mercer realized there was no way out. He removed the vial containing Blacklight and smashed it against the floor. The virus was released into the station. Moments later, Blackwatch operatives opened fire and killed Alexander J. Mercer. His body collapsed near the shattered vial, allowing the virus to enter through his wounds. Blackwatch recovered the corpse and transported it away, believing the threat had been eliminated. What they did not understand was that Blacklight did more than infect living tissue. It absorbed genetic information, copied it, preserved it, and rebuilt biological structures from within. Alexander J. Mercer was dead, but the virus had begun reconstructing him. Mercer's body was transported to a Gentek facility and taken to the morgue for autopsy. 2 scientists wearing protective suits entered the room. One of them carried a tablet and read through the brief profile attached to the body. They recognized the face immediately. Mercer, Alexander J., the researcher from Project Blacklight. There were no detailed instructions, only another corpse waiting to be examined. The second scientist took out a scalpel and leaned over Mercer. Then the body suddenly drew breath. Mercer bolted upright. The scientists recoiled in terror, and one of them shouted that a cleanup team had to be called immediately. Both fled the room, abandoning their equipment. Mercer struggled to his feet, breathing heavily, and eventually made his way outside with no understanding of what had happened to him. There, he watched a Blackwatch helicopter descend nearby. An assault team emerged and immediately surrounded the fleeing Gentek scientists. There were no questions and no attempt to detain them. The soldiers simply opened fire, killing both men in full view of nearby civilians. Mercer remained hidden behind a corner until one of the soldiers spotted him. He was immediately designated a priority target. Mercer tried to stop them, but the soldiers responded with rifle fire. Bullets tore into his body and knocked him to the ground. He screamed in pain, only to watch his wounds close almost instantly. Within seconds, his body had completely regenerated. He rose again and saw a low perimeter fence separating him from the street beyond. Realizing that Blackwatch intended to kill him, Mercer sprinted toward it, vaulted onto a dumpster, and cleared the barrier. He had no answers, but he now understood that he had to escape before his pursuers could finish the job. Another helicopter arrived overhead. Mercer turned and ran down the street as civilians scattered in panic. He moved with impossible speed, leaping over vehicles and tearing through obstacles in his path. Machine gun fire struck him from behind, but failed to slow him. When the helicopter crew realized that conventional weapons were ineffective, they launched a missile. Mercer reacted instinctively, seized a nearby taxi, and hurled it into the aircraft. The impact destroyed the helicopter in a fireball, scattering burning wreckage across the street below. Even Mercer seemed stunned by what he had just done. The surviving Blackwatch forces temporarily lost track of him, giving Mercer a chance to escape. But the strain of the chase, the gunfire, the regeneration, and the sudden manifestation of his abilities began to overwhelm him. His vision blurred. Fragments of voices and memories surfaced in his mind. The scientists, his name, flashes of pain. His legs gave way. Mercer collapsed beside a wall and lost consciousness. Sometime later, a Blackwatch patrolman discovered him. The soldier reported visual contact and fired, believing he had killed the target. As he reported that the hostile was down, Mercer rose behind him. He seized the soldier, killed him, and instinctively consumed his body. The effect was immediate. Mercer experienced the dead man's memories as though they were his own. At the same time, he discovered that he could reshape his body and assume the appearance of those he consumed. When the patrol commander arrived demanding to know where the target had gone, Mercer attacked and consumed him as well. He took the man's form, studied his transformed hands, and began to understand the scale of what he had become capable of doing. From the memories of First Lieutenant Charles Perry, Mercer learned that he had a sister named Dana, where she lived, and that Blackwatch was already searching for her. With no memories of his former life, and no one else he could trust, Mercer hoped Dana might know what had happened to him. When he reached her apartment building, Blackwatch soldiers had already surrounded it. Using the identities he had stolen, Mercer infiltrated the perimeter and entered the building. Inside Dana's apartment, he found a soldier holding her at gunpoint. Dana fought back, striking the man, and Mercer killed him with a single blow. Dana immediately recoiled from her brother. The man standing before her looked like Alex, but what she had just witnessed made it clear that something was profoundly wrong. Mercer assured her that he had no intention of hurting her. He needed her help. They escaped and found a safer place where Dana could explain what she knew. She told him that something had been happening inside Gentek before his disappearance. She did not know what had happened to Alex himself, but she remembered the investigation he had begun before losing his memory. Dana had been helping him research Gentek and the people connected to it. He had given her names and leads to follow shortly before vanishing. The conversation triggered another fragment of Mercer's memory. McMullen, Dr. Raymond McMullen. Dana took Mercer to an apartment belonging to friends who had left the city for the year. It became their temporary safe house. There, an evidence board covered with files, documents, photographs, and printed records contained everything Dana had collected about Gentek at Alex's request before his disappearance. Dana could not explain the conspiracy herself. She asked Mercer to continue the investigation and determine what Gentek had been hiding. She also warned him that if Blackwatch had been waiting at her apartment, there was a strong chance his own home had been compromised as well. Mercer returned to his former apartment. It was supposed to have been his home, yet without his memories, it felt like someone else's life. A photograph on the wall showed Alex and Dana together, preserving an image of a quieter existence he could no longer remember. Another photograph showed Mercer beside a blonde woman. The moment he touched it, another memory surfaced. Karen Parker, his former girlfriend. The memories came back in painful fragments as Mercer struggled to understand the life of the man whose body and identity he now possessed. Elsewhere, Blackwatch Command issued the order to eliminate him. An explosive charge detonated inside the apartment, engulfing the room and throwing Mercer through the window. He twisted in midair and landed on the street below with enough force to crack the ground beneath him. Mercer survived. Now he knew someone had deliberately ordered the attack, and he went after the man responsible. The order had come from Captain Mac Marshall. Despite warnings from Raymond McMullen about Mercer's capabilities, Marshall had underestimated the target. Mercer infiltrated the Blackwatch forces, located Marshall, killed him, and consumed him, acquiring his memories in the process. Marshall's failure to understand what Mercer had become ultimately cost him his life. By the third day after the initial outbreak, the first confirmed cases of infection were already appearing across Manhattan. While the city moved closer to open crisis, Mercer continued exploring his rapidly developing abilities. He crossed Manhattan with superhuman speed, growing stronger and learning how to control both his combat abilities and his shapeshifting. When he returned to the safe house, Dana showed him a laptop he had sent to her shortly before disappearing. Among its files were photographs of a young woman Mercer recognized. Only two names were directly associated with the material: Alex Mercer and Elizabeth Greene. The records indicated that Greene was being held inside Gentek. Believing she might provide the answers he needed, Mercer decided to find her. At the same time, Blackwatch was escalating its response. General Peter Randall assigned Colonel Ian Taggart command of conventional ground forces in Manhattan. Taggart ordered the island sealed, bridges closed, and major military positions reinforced throughout the city. He understood the scale of the problem. His soldiers had not been trained or equipped to contain a biological outbreak of this magnitude, and he resented Blackwatch's willingness to treat conventional troops as expendable. Nevertheless, he obeyed Randall's orders, knowing the general would not tolerate insubordination. Captain Robert Cross then appeared before Randall. Cross commanded the Wiseman team, a group of elite Blackwatch operatives. Randall gave them a single priority objective: locate Alex Mercer, designated Zeus, and neutralize him regardless of whether he was captured alive or killed. Mercer was already moving toward Gentek. He penetrated the military perimeter and consumed First Lieutenant Todd Chupka, gaining access to his memories and identity. Chupka knew that a unit deployed to the 51st floor of Gentek headquarters had stopped responding, and that large quantities of blood had been discovered inside. The section had subsequently been sealed off. That was exactly where Mercer needed to go. Using Chupka's identity, he entered the building and reached the Blacklight Research Division. The corridors near the containment area were littered with the bodies of Blackwatch soldiers. At the center of the carnage was Elizabeth Greene. Mercer entered her chamber. Greene whispered quietly as he approached. Without warning, she struck him with enough force to throw him across the room. When she touched him again, Mercer experienced a violent vision filled with fragments of her past and glimpses of what the infection had become. While he struggled to recover, Greene broke through the wall of her containment chamber and escaped from the building. Her freedom marked a major turning point in the outbreak. She re-established control over the infected and unleashed hunters against Mercer. One of the creatures struck Mercer and sent him crashing from the floor into the courtyard below. Unsure how to fight them effectively, Mercer consumed a nearby soldier and learned from his memories about a military warehouse nearby, with a vulnerable access point in its roof. He moved toward the facility, drawing the hunters after him. Mercer entered through the roof and engaged one of the creatures inside. After weakening it with conventional weapons, he consumed it. The absorption triggered another transformation. His arms reshaped into enormous claws. Mercer immediately turned the new weapon against the remaining hunters, tearing through them at close range. More creatures continued to arrive, eventually overwhelming the facility. With no reason to preserve the warehouse, Mercer destroyed the fuel tanks and detonated the entire structure, killing the infected creatures inside. As Manhattan descended further into panic and the military began losing control of critical locations across the city, another chain of events was already unfolding elsewhere. Inside St. Patrick's Cathedral, Detective McCluskey sat among the worshippers. Faith was not necessarily what brought him there. More than anything, he seemed to be holding on to the last remnants of order in a world he understood. His partner, Detective Garcia, approached him. They had worked together for years, and she knew there was no need for a long conversation. A hand on his back was enough. It was time to go. Their next case involved a mass killing in the West Side, inside an abandoned tunnel belonging to an old subway line where a homeless community had taken shelter. When the detectives arrived, the officers already at the scene initially assumed that some deranged killer had entered the tunnel and massacred everyone inside. Faced with the carnage, McCluskey lit a cigarette and quietly made Garcia understand why he spent his mornings in church. At the entrance, an officer instructed them to put on protective suits before proceeding underground. McCluskey and Garcia descended into the tunnel and found bodies scattered everywhere. Men, women, children, even dogs had been torn apart indiscriminately. The scale of the slaughter made it almost impossible to believe that a single attacker could have been responsible. A medical examiner showed them one of the victims. The body bore deep lacerations and massive bite wounds. Whatever had done this, he told them, was not human. Judging by the injuries, the creature possessed jaws larger than those of a great white shark and claws comparable to those of a grizzly bear. The same unidentified bite and claw patterns appeared across the other bodies. McCluskey asked about fingerprints. The examiner instead pointed toward the wall, where long, bloody claw marks had been dragged across the surface. There were no conventional prints to recover. After leaving the scene, McCluskey and Garcia returned to the precinct to examine information recently provided by federal authorities following an attack on a strike team. At the center of the material was Alex Mercer. Garcia found the allegations difficult to accept. Mercer had been a highly educated scientist, and the idea that he had somehow transformed into a roaming mass murderer seemed absurd. McCluskey, however, had already heard rumors surrounding him. Mercer had reportedly worked for a company called Gentek. McCluskey began looking into the corporation and discovered that Gentek had been among the private research companies authorized to conduct advanced work involving the human genome. That raised a disturbing possibility. Mercer might not simply have been a scientist. He might have participated in a genetic weapons program, or even become one of its experimental subjects. McCluskey was determined to find him, even if doing so meant challenging federal agencies and the authorities trying to control the investigation. He intended to arrest Mercer and learn what had happened. Garcia was beginning to wonder whether her partner was becoming dangerously obsessed with the case. Not long afterward, the detectives were called to what was initially described as a possible terrorist attack. Patrol officers reported numerous casualties, but traffic had brought the surrounding streets to a standstill, forcing McCluskey and Garcia to continue on foot. Broadway had descended into chaos. Explosions echoed between the buildings. Gunfire erupted in the distance while helicopters thundered overhead. As the detectives ran toward the scene, a car exploded nearby. A badly wounded woman, missing an arm and covered in blood, stood in the street asking desperately if anyone had seen her dog. Civilians were injured everywhere, and emergency services were already overwhelmed. McCluskey confronted a sergeant and demanded to know what had happened. Struggling to catch his breath, the man explained that multiple witnesses claimed they had been attacked by monsters. Another formation of helicopters swept low between the buildings. Garcia initially wondered whether the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention had become involved, but the military presence made no sense. Moments later, troops wearing black tactical uniforms began moving into the area, accompanied by armored vehicles. They offered no explanations. Police officers were pushed aside as military units established positions and closed the perimeter. Manhattan was being sealed. Blackwatch had begun its containment operation, moving to isolate the island as the viral crisis escalated. General Peter Randall monitored the deployment while confronting the return of a nightmare he had first encountered decades earlier in Hope. The infection had already cost him his left arm after his encounter with Elizabeth Greene, and now Greene herself was somewhere in Manhattan. McCluskey immediately understood that the violence surrounding them was not an ordinary terrorist attack. Something much larger was happening. He and Garcia headed to Soho to meet an acquaintance named Maxwell Robbins, a man McCluskey trusted for information that could not be obtained through official channels. Robbins was deeply suspicious of government institutions and had spent years researching classified programs and corporate connections. He told the detectives that Gentek had been associated with genetic experimentation for decades. According to Robbins, the origins of the current disaster stretched far beyond Manhattan. They reached back to Hope, Idaho, where an entire town had effectively disappeared from public history. When the crisis in New York began, Robbins used his contacts and unauthorized access to government systems to investigate. What he found suggested that a highly dangerous biological asset had gone missing, something connected to research that had begun as far back as the 1960s. Whatever it was now loose in New York. Robbins approached the window and looked down at the street. He advised McCluskey and Garcia to leave the city while they still could. A gunshot shattered the window. The bullet struck Robbins in the head, killing him instantly. McCluskey and Garcia reacted immediately. They drew their service weapons and rushed into the corridor, where they encountered two armed soldiers. Both sides raised their weapons. Orders were shouted. McCluskey and Garcia slowly lifted their hands, appearing to surrender. Then they attacked. Garcia drove her elbow into the nearest soldier's face, while McCluskey struck the second man and disarmed him. Within seconds, both soldiers were on the floor. During the interrogation that followed, one of the men admitted that his unit had been ordered to kill anyone found inside designated infected zones. The order applied indiscriminately. The soldiers had no intention of questioning it. From their perspective, the creatures were everywhere, the city was collapsing, and Manhattan had already become a battlefield. McCluskey and Garcia took their weapons and left. Later, dispatch reported that the military had established a cordon between Broadway and Fifth Avenue. No civilians were permitted inside the restricted area, and that prohibition now effectively included the detectives themselves. Another attack was reported on 125th Street. McCluskey and Garcia arrived at an abandoned building that appeared completely deserted. The silence immediately put them on edge. They climbed the stairs and moved through a dusty corridor, their footsteps echoing through the empty structure. Then the wall exploded inward. Concrete and dust filled the hallway as a hunter emerged from the wreckage. Both detectives opened fire instinctively. The bullets had almost no effect. McCluskey grabbed Garcia and forced open a nearby door as they narrowly avoided the creature's attack. Still shaken, Garcia asked whether the thing pursuing them could somehow be Mercer. McCluskey could only hope that it was not. The hunter entered the room behind them. There was nowhere left to retreat. Their only remaining escape route was the window. McCluskey grabbed Garcia's hand and they jumped. They crashed through the glass as the hunter roared behind them. Meanwhile, General Randall received confirmation that Maxwell Robbins had been killed on his orders. He was also informed that two unexpected witnesses, McCluskey and Garcia, had survived the operation. Randall ordered Blackwatch to locate and eliminate them as well. The detectives landed hard on the roof of a taxi below. Seconds later, the hunter burst through the broken window above and leapt after them, crashing onto the vehicle with enough force to collapse its roof. The chase continued through the narrow streets. McCluskey and Garcia ran between parked vehicles before cutting sharply onto the roadway. The hunter followed directly behind them. Then a fire engine came around the corner at full speed. The vehicle struck the creature head-on. The impact was powerful enough to kill it. McCluskey and Garcia cautiously approached the body as pedestrians began gathering around the wreckage. The corpse was visibly neither human nor animal. No one could identify what they were looking at. The detectives returned to their car. Garcia wiped blood from her face and finally said what both of them had already begun to understand. Whatever was happening in Manhattan had moved far beyond anything they were equipped to deal with. They needed to leave the city while escape was still possible. They were already too late. The moment they entered the car, a searchlight illuminated them from above. A helicopter hovered over the street, and a voice from its loudspeaker ordered them to exit the vehicle with their hands raised. At Red Crown Command, General Randall gave Captain Robert Cross and his men a separate priority. They were to capture Zeus at any cost. Randall believed Mercer might represent the only remaining opportunity to control the infection without resorting to more extreme measures. Cross understood the order. His forces were already closing in on Mercer. Through the windshield of their sedan, McCluskey and Garcia noticed a hooded figure standing on the roof of a nearby building. The figure jumped. He struck the street with enough force to shake the ground and shouted for the detectives to drive. Before they could fully understand what was happening, the helicopter's targeting system shifted away from them. Its attention was now fixed on Zeus, on Alex Mercer. Mercer immediately broke into a sprint as automatic fire followed him down the street. Bullets ricocheted from the surrounding cars while he ran directly through the barrage. He leapt onto the support structure of a traffic light, used it as a launch point, and propelled himself high into the air. Twisting through the air above the helicopter, Mercer redirected himself and crashed through the window of a nearby office building. Gunfire followed him inside. Mercer continued running between desks as terrified office workers scattered through the room. Bullets tore through glass, walls, and furniture behind him, striking civilians caught in the line of fire. Mercer reached an empty corridor. Only a lone maintenance worker stood nearby with a cleaning cart beside the elevators. Mercer seized him and consumed him without hesitation. In an instant, the killer in the hood was gone. In his place stood an ordinary maintenance worker in uniform, looking like someone who had spent years cleaning the same floors. Mercer walked calmly through the main entrance. The soldiers barely glanced in his direction. None of them expected their priority target to be hiding in the form of a janitor. Meanwhile, McCluskey had decided that remaining in Manhattan was no longer an option. The problem was that every bridge and tunnel had been sealed and placed under military control to prevent the infection from spreading beyond the island. He believed there might still be a way through the subway tunnels toward Grand Central Terminal. The military might not have secured every underground route yet, but he and Garcia would still need disguises. An opportunity presented itself almost immediately. 3 soldiers were using the chaos to loot an electronics store. McCluskey accelerated directly toward them and struck them with the car. He then took their uniforms. Garcia was shocked by his actions, but McCluskey made it clear that the city had already become a war zone. Their badges no longer meant anything. They were being hunted by both the government and the creatures spreading through Manhattan, and survival had become their only priority. The pressure of everything they had endured finally broke through the distance between them, and McCluskey and Garcia kissed. They quickly began changing into the stolen uniforms, but before they could finish, a Blackwatch patrol arrived and demanded to know what was happening. McCluskey opened fire and ordered Garcia to run through the looted store. During the escape, she stepped on a shard of broken glass and badly injured her foot. McCluskey fought his way through the soldiers, carried Garcia away, and continued firing until the immediate pursuit had been eliminated. They replaced the regular military uniforms with Blackwatch equipment and attempted to stop Garcia's bleeding with whatever materials they had available. They entered the subway system. The station was deserted, illuminated only by weak emergency lighting. McCluskey supported Garcia as they moved through the tunnels. She could barely walk, but continued forward. In the darkness beneath the city, McCluskey finally admitted how he felt about her. Garcia told him she felt the same way, and they kissed again. Their moment of peace ended when a pack of hunters appeared in the tunnel. The creatures rapidly closed the distance. McCluskey understood that they could not outrun them, so he turned and opened fire while Garcia continued moving. One of the hunters leapt onto the tracks and made contact with the electrified rail. A violent surge tore through its body, killing it almost instantly. The detectives rushed into a service room beside the tracks, but another hunter emerged from the darkness and seized McCluskey by the throat. Garcia raised her weapon and fired, but the creature moved at the last moment, and the bullet struck McCluskey in the leg. The hunter threw them both to the floor. Garcia pulled out pepper spray and discharged it directly into the creature's face. The hunter recoiled, giving her time to reach for her rifle, but it recovered before she could fire. Despite the wound in his leg, McCluskey threw himself onto the creature and attempted to restrain it from behind. The hunter bit through his left arm. Garcia raised the rifle and fired into the back of the creature's head, killing it. She immediately removed her belt and tightened it above McCluskey's elbow in an attempt to slow the bleeding. But the injury was no longer the only problem. McCluskey had been infected. He began to feel something changing inside him. A woman's voice entered his mind. Elizabeth Greene. The infected were connected to her through a collective consciousness, and McCluskey could feel that presence spreading through him. His identity was beginning to erode, but part of him was still resisting. Through the connection, he sensed something else. Greene was afraid of Mercer. Alex represented a threat to her. McCluskey looked at Garcia and told her to leave before he lost control completely. She refused at first, but he insisted. He was still human for the moment, and he wanted to die before that changed. Garcia finally stepped away. McCluskey raised his weapon and shot himself. It was not enough. His body mutated and rose again as an infected creature. Garcia, devastated by what had happened, opened fire. McCluskey's transformed body collapsed onto the tracks. She was left alone in the darkness. Above ground, martial law had been declared across Manhattan. The outbreak was being described as one of the most severe biological disasters in American history. Hundreds of thousands of civilians were moved into quarantine zones, while the principal bridges and tunnels were sealed and guarded by military forces. Anyone attempting to enter or leave restricted areas faced armed resistance. Manhattan had effectively become isolated from the rest of New York. Reports about Alex Mercer were spreading through the media. Some claimed that he had been seen killing infected creatures and mutants, raising the possibility that he might somehow be capable of stopping the outbreak. Others suggested that Mercer himself was connected to the infection's origin. For Garcia, none of that mattered anymore. Still wounded, she continued through the dark subway tunnel until fever and nausea overwhelmed her. Her strength failed, and she collapsed. McCluskey had infected her during their final kiss. The virus began transforming her body. Garcia lost herself to the same network that had consumed McCluskey and became another creature under Greene's influence. She emerged from the subway no longer fully human. Soldiers immediately opened fire. The gunfire failed to stop her. Garcia tore through them and escaped beyond the immediate containment area. The fate of McCluskey and Garcia showed what the outbreak looked like from the perspective of ordinary people caught inside it. Within days, the structures they had relied upon had collapsed. The authorities concealed information, military forces treated civilians as potential threats, and police officers, emergency workers, and other people closest to the disaster became some of its earliest victims. Elsewhere, Mercer returned to Dana. She told him that Karen Parker had once been one of the people closest to him, and that they needed to find her before the military did. Mercer headed toward Karen's apartment, but the surrounding district was already heavily infected. Gunfire echoed through the streets while infected civilians attacked anyone nearby. Mercer entered the apartment and found Karen alive. She was genuinely shocked to see him. Her first instinct was to embrace him, but Mercer remained distant. The memories and emotions that had once defined their relationship were largely absent. He needed her expertise, not reconciliation. He asked for her help in stopping the outbreak. Karen agreed. Mercer commandeered an armored personnel carrier and used it to destroy a nearby hive, created by Greene's infection, clearing a path out of the quarantine zone. He then escorted Karen to another safe location in East Harlem, where she established a temporary laboratory. Karen explained that the infection appeared to be undergoing two distinct forms of rapid genetic change. To understand how the virus was evolving, she needed biological samples from both. Mercer would have to collect them himself. The first samples came from infected water towers. The second had to be taken directly from a hive. Karen understood that approaching either source would be extremely dangerous, but she also understood that Mercer possessed abilities no ordinary human had. With no better alternative, Mercer began collecting the material she needed. He moved across the infected districts, extracting genetic samples while simultaneously fighting both infected creatures and military forces attempting to destroy the hives. Karen began studying the samples, searching for a way to understand the rapidly changing virus and possibly stop it. After completing the assignment, Mercer returned to Dana and received another piece of information. The USS Ronald Reagan had arrived off New York to support the containment operation, serving as a military staging point and providing fire support if necessary. Dana had also learned that Raymond McMullen was expected to meet with General Randall at Blackwatch Command. If Mercer wanted to understand what had been done to him, McMullen remained one of his best leads. Mercer began observing one of the military bases. It was heavily fortified, but someone inside had to know something about McMullen. Assuming a military disguise, he entered the compound and searched for an officer with access to useful information. After identifying and consuming the right target, Mercer learned about a new system Blackwatch had deployed specifically to locate him. Viral detectors had been positioned throughout Manhattan, particularly around military bases and strike teams. They continuously sampled the surrounding environment for traces of the virus and were capable of detecting Mercer even while he was disguised. If Blackwatch could determine where he had been moving, it might eventually trace him back to Dana's safe house. Mercer could not allow that to happen. He attacked the military infrastructure supporting the detectors, destroying armored vehicles, helicopters, and surveillance equipment before Blackwatch could narrow down his location. By the following day, however, the organization had begun deploying replacement detectors throughout Manhattan, forcing Mercer to move from one installation to another and disable them again. At Blackwatch Command, General Randall watched the evening news. The official explanation surrounding the Manhattan crisis was beginning to change. What had initially been described as a chemical incident was now being presented as a deliberate biological attack, with Alex Mercer publicly identified as a suspect. Blackwatch itself remained absent from the reports. Randall then summoned Raymond McMullen to discuss Zeus. McMullen revealed that his researchers had used biological material connected to Mercer to develop a specialized pathogen designed to attack the viral organism directly. If successfully introduced into Zeus, the agent might weaken or even destroy him. Randall ordered Captain Robert Cross to personally administer the pathogen and capture Mercer. Cross questioned the order, but Randall immediately made it clear that his decision was not open to debate. Cross accepted the assignment and left. Afterward, Randall placed a classified document concerning nuclear weapons protocols on his desk. Blackwatch was already considering measures far beyond conventional containment. Dana continued searching for information about McMullen. Reports indicated that Blackwatch scientific teams were repeatedly attempting to penetrate infected hives. Dana concluded that the researchers were almost certainly operating under McMullen's authority. If Mercer could reach one of those teams, he might be able to discover how to force McMullen into the open. Mercer infiltrated another military position and consumed a commander involved in the operation. From his memories, he learned that McMullen would not land in an infected sector until the viral detectors confirmed that the area was safe. That gave Mercer a way to lure him in. Disguised as a Blackwatch officer, Mercer approached the detectors and disabled them one after another, while surrounded by soldiers who believed he belonged there. McMullen became increasingly frustrated as contact with the devices disappeared. eventually interpreting the readings as evidence that viral activity in the sector was declining. Mercer transmitted a false report over the radio. The area was clear. McMullen's helicopter approached the landing zone. Just as it was preparing to touch down, the nearby hive became active and released infected creatures into the area. McMullen immediately realized that the situation had been manipulated. He recognized Mercer and ordered the pilot to pull away before the helicopter could land. Mercer had lost his opportunity. After escaping the military response, he returned to Karen Parker. Karen told him that the samples he had previously collected were not enough. She now needed material from inside an active hive. According to her, the substance being produced at the center of the infected structure might contain the key to understanding the virus and developing a treatment. Mercer agreed to retrieve it. He entered a nearby hive and began collecting genetic material from its interior. Then Captain Cross arrived. Cross descended into the hive and confronted Mercer directly, armed with his electroshock weapon and supported by Blackwatch forces. Mercer immediately realized what had happened. Karen had betrayed him. The samples, the research, and the request to enter the hive had all placed him exactly where Blackwatch wanted him. Mercer fought Cross inside the infected structure. Cross used his weapons and military support to keep Mercer at a distance, while infected creatures continued attacking both sides. Eventually, Mercer gained the advantage and forced Cross into retreat. Both emerged from the hive. Cross kept Mercer occupied, speaking to him while quietly preparing the weapon McMullen had developed. Then he mentioned Pennsylvania Station. The words triggered a violent reaction. Fragments of Mercer's buried memories returned. The station, the vial, gunfire, and death. While Mercer was disoriented, Cross moved behind him and injected the pathogen directly into his body. The effect was immediate. The organism began attacking Mercer from within, suppressing many of his viral abilities and severely weakening him. Cross ordered his men to finish the operation, but Mercer recovered enough strength to escape before they could capture him. The parasite remained inside his body, continuing to spread and interfere with his powers. Mercer now understood that Karen had knowingly delivered him into a Blackwatch trap. He needed to tell Dana what had happened, but first he intended to deal with Karen Parker. Mercer returned to Dana. She had learned that Blackwatch was searching for a doctor named Bradley Ragland, a pathologist who might be able to help Mercer reach McMullen. Dana warned him that Ragland was not an enemy and should not be harmed. Before Mercer left, she showed him what she had uncovered about Hope, Idaho, and Elizabeth Greene. Mercer told her that Hope had been an experiment. Dana immediately asked how he could possibly know that. For the first time, Mercer admitted the truth. He had killed and consumed a vast number of people, and their memories now existed inside him. Everything they had known, everything they had seen, remained buried somewhere in his mind. The revelation deeply disturbed Dana. The figure standing before her still looked like her brother, and still seemed to possess some attachment to her, but he was no longer the Alex Mercer she had known. Something else was now wearing his face. Mercer found Dr. Bradley Ragland working in the morgue at St. Paul's Hospital. Ragland showed surprisingly little fear when the unexpected visitor appeared. Mercer wasted no time explaining the situation. He demonstrated the symptoms caused by the parasite inside his body and asked for help. Ragland examined him and agreed. To understand what was happening, however, he needed access to biological material from the earliest victims of the outbreak, the people infected during the initial release at Penn Station. Mercer therefore began searching for information about where Blackwatch had taken the bodies. He tracked down and consumed Captain Lim. From Lim's memories, Mercer learned that the bodies of the earliest infected victims had originally been delivered to Ragland for examination on McMullen's orders. Blackwatch had later decided to reclaim the evidence. Lim had been instructed to confiscate the bodies, biological samples, and all related material, and return them to military custody. Ragland himself was to remain unharmed unless he resisted. By this point, Mercer was rapidly deteriorating. The parasite Cross had injected into him was consuming him from within. He returned to Ragland's morgue, but collapsed before the doctor could complete his examination. Ragland believed the parasite could be destroyed by depriving it of whatever biological mechanism allowed it to survive inside Mercer. To test the theory, he needed access to infected tissue from the original outbreak victims. Transporting him safely through the city required military protection. Mercer acquired an armored vehicle and escorted Ragland to the location where the necessary bodies were being held. While the doctor worked, Mercer defended the position against waves of infected creatures. Walkers, hunters, and other mutations converged on the area, but Mercer prevented them from reaching Ragland until the required samples had been recovered. They returned to the morgue. Using the material, Ragland developed a biological agent capable of producing the antibodies needed to destroy the parasite. There was one complication. The agent could not be used directly on Mercer. It first required a living host with a compatible genetic structure. The host would absorb the agent, produce the necessary antibodies, and then Mercer would have to consume it. A hunter possessed the appropriate genotype. Mercer decided to use Blackwatch technology to locate one. He found one of the specialized viral scanners mounted aboard military helicopters and reconfigured it to search for the required genetic profile. To operate the aircraft effectively, however, he needed a trained pilot. Mercer solved the problem in the simplest way available to him. He found an experienced military pilot and consumed him. Within seconds, years of flight training and practical experience became Mercer's own. He took control of a helicopter and began scanning Manhattan from the air. The detector gradually picked up a stronger signal, leading him toward an infected water tower. Then the structure ruptured. A hunter burst from inside. Mercer immediately engaged the creature, weakened it, and injected Ragland's biological agent into its body. He then withdrew and allowed the hunter's metabolism to process the substance. Several minutes later, the creature began to weaken. Mercer consumed it. The effect was immediate. The parasite inside him was destroyed, but its removal triggered another dramatic change in Mercer's biology. His viral structure adapted once again, unlocking abilities that the parasite had previously suppressed. Dense organic armor formed over his body, covering him in a hardened biological shell. At the same time, one of his arms transformed into a massive razor-edged blade. Mercer had recovered and emerged stronger than before. He returned to Dana. For once, Mercer struggled to explain himself. He did not know how to describe everything that had happened to him or what he had become. More than anything, he wanted to understand why Gentek and Blackwatch had done this to him and why his life had been connected to the virus in the first place. Dana listened. Before either of them could continue, they heard a series of heavy impacts approaching the building. Something was coming toward them. The wall suddenly exploded inward. A massive hunter entered the room, far larger and more powerful than the creatures Mercer had previously encountered. This was a leader hunter, an advanced infected organism capable of directing lesser creatures. It seized Dana. Mercer immediately attacked, but the creature escaped with her into the city. He pursued it through the streets, but the leader hunter repeatedly sent ordinary hunters against him to slow his advance. Mercer destroyed them one after another, yet the larger creature eventually disappeared with Dana. He did not know why Greene wanted his sister. Dana might have been intended as bait, leverage, or simply another victim. Whatever the reason, Mercer knew he had to find her. The infected behaved like animals operating under Greene's control. That connection offered him his only lead. If he could consume organisms linked closely enough to the hive mind, their memories might eventually reveal where Dana had been taken. By the 10th day after the initial outbreak, more than half of Manhattan's population had been infected. Conventional forces were losing control of the island, and Blackwatch was being pushed toward increasingly desperate measures. Time was running out. Mercer turned to Ragland for help. The doctor theorized that the unusual hunter responsible for Dana's abduction might function as a leader within the infected hierarchy. If Mercer could consume such a creature, he might gain access to the network connecting the infected and use it to trace Greene. Finding another leader, hunter, was not difficult. One of the creatures was rampaging openly through a section of the city, making itself impossible to miss. Mercer attacked it and attempted to consume it. The process failed. The creature resisted assimilation. Mercer changed tactics. Rather than destroy it, He incapacitated the leader hunter and transported it to a secured military base where Ragland could examine it. The doctor discovered why Mercer had been unable to consume the creature normally. Its anatomy was redundant. The leader hunter possessed 2 brains and 2 spinal columns. Damaging only one neurological system was not enough to render it vulnerable. Both had to be disrupted simultaneously before assimilation could occur. Mercer tested Ragland's theory on the captive organism. This time it worked. He consumed the leader hunter and acquired a new ability, infected vision. More importantly, the absorption connected him directly to the infected hive mind. Through that biological network, Mercer could identify infected individuals and extract fragments of information leading back toward Greene and Dana. Mercer began hunting infected carriers linked to the network, consuming them one after another, and following the memories transmitted through the hive mind. Eventually, he located the leader hunter that had abducted Dana. Mercer found and consumed it. Its memories revealed that Dana had been taken to the core hive in the center of Manhattan. The structure was heavily armored and nearly impossible to penetrate through conventional means. Mercer therefore turned Blackwatch's own weapons against it. He commandeered a thermobaric tank and used it to destroy the reinforced exterior of the hive, opening a path inside. Deep within the infected structure, Mercer finally confronted Elizabeth Greene. She told him that Dana belonged to them now. Mercer attacked. The two collided with tremendous force, trading blows as they moved through the interior of the hive. During the struggle, Greene leapt onto him. Mercer had prepared for the encounter. He produced a syringe containing the same parasite that had once been used against him and injected it into Greene. Her reaction was immediate. Unlike Mercer, Greene's body rejected the organism almost instantly. She expelled an enormous mass of infected biomass, which rapidly reorganized itself into an entirely new creature, the Supreme Hunter. The organism was born from the parasite designed to kill Mercer, transformed after its rejection by Greene's body into one of the most powerful infected creatures yet encountered. Mercer fought the Supreme Hunter inside the hive and eventually defeated it. With the creature destroyed, he found Dana and carried her out of the infected structure. For the moment, his sister was safe. As Mercer escaped from the core hive with Dana, he stepped through a pool of residual biomass left behind by the battle. Behind him, a clawed hand slowly emerged from the remains, revealing that the creature born from Greene's rejection of the parasite had survived. Mercer carried Dana directly to Dr. Ragland and demanded his help. Ragland examined her and determined that she was unconscious but stable. With Dana temporarily safe, the doctor turned Mercer's attention to a map that had been anonymously delivered to him. Several locations had been marked in red, apparently revealing the next stage of Blackwatch's containment operation. Mercer asked Ragland to look after Dana and left to investigate. As he moved through the city, a nearby payphone suddenly rang. A mobile phone had been attached beneath it. Mercer answered. A distorted voice addressed him by name. The unidentified caller spoke about events that had taken place 40 years earlier, about Elizabeth Greene and Hope, Idaho. Then he revealed something far more disturbing. Mercer was not human. He was the virus itself. Blacklight. The caller warned him that Blackwatch was preparing to deploy a new weapon against the infection from the air. He provided coordinates leading to a rooftop fueling station in the Highlines district, where Mercer would be able to learn more. Mercer infiltrated the location disguised as a soldier and consumed a serviceman with access to the program. From his memories, he discovered the existence of Blackwatch super soldiers. These men had been deliberately enhanced through viral experimentation. They had been exposed to a controlled strain that radically altered their cellular structure, giving them accelerated regeneration, enormous physical strength, and greatly increased speed. Their bodies had then been surgically reinforced with additional modifications, turning them into heavily armored biological weapons. More importantly, the super soldiers possessed an innate ability to identify viral organisms. Mercer could not hide from them simply by changing his appearance. To learn more about Blackwatch's new weapon, Mercer needed access to one of their air bases. He assumed the identity of a military pilot and began carrying out evacuation missions, transporting soldiers from heavily infected districts back to secure positions. He performed the role convincingly, waiting until Blackwatch finally issued the order he needed. He was summoned to a classified briefing. Mercer flew to the designated base and entered a hangar filled with military personnel. An officer began explaining a newly developed weapon, blood tox. It was a specialized biochemical agent designed specifically to attack viral tissue. To ordinary humans, it was largely harmless. To Blacklight organisms, however, it was lethal. As the briefing continued, the ventilation system activated. Red vapor began pouring into the room. The soldiers remained unaffected. Mercer did not. He began coughing violently as blood tox entered his body. His disguise destabilized and collapsed, exposing him in front of everyone present. Blackwatch immediately opened fire. Mercer fought his way through the hangar as super soldiers descended into the battle one after another. Despite their strength and resistance, he tore through the personnel and equipment surrounding him, destroyed much of the installation, and finally escaped into the city. The following day, the mysterious contact called again. Blackwatch intended to saturate as much territory as possible with blood tox, beginning with southern Manhattan. Multiple dispersal units had already been activated at strategic locations across the district, gradually making the area increasingly hostile to viral organisms. If the operation succeeded, Mercer himself would eventually be unable to survive there. He began destroying the blood tox installations one by one, moving rapidly across southern Manhattan and fighting through the Blackwatch forces defending them. When the final unit was destroyed, the concentration of blood tox in the area began to fall. The contact called once more. The virus had adapted. Rather than remain exposed on the surface, the infection had retreated beneath Manhattan and was spreading through the underground infrastructure. If left unchecked, it could continue expanding beneath the city before erupting elsewhere. There was only one practical way to force it back into the open. Blood tox had to be pumped directly underground. The contact instructed Mercer to assist Blackwatch in transporting a blood tox pumping system to Times Square. Mercer infiltrated the military operation by assuming the identity of an officer and issued the necessary orders. The convoy began moving through the city. At its center was the heavy blood tox pumping unit, surrounded by Blackwatch soldiers and armored vehicles. The infected immediately reacted to its presence. They attacked from every direction, attempting to destroy the machine before it could reach its destination. Mercer defended the convoy. For the first time, he was effectively fighting alongside Blackwatch. He destroyed infected creatures as they attacked the column, while military helicopters and armored units struggled to keep the route open. Eventually, the convoy reached Times Square. The pumping system was installed and a defensive perimeter established around it. Mercer activated the machinery. Blood tox began being forced deep beneath the streets of Manhattan. The infected responded almost immediately. Waves of creatures converged on the pump, driven by Greene's hive mind. Blackwatch reinforcements joined the defense, including super soldiers. Although their viral senses were capable of detecting Mercer, protecting the blood tox deployment remained the immediate priority. Then the hydras appeared. Enormous infected organisms erupted from beneath the streets, towering masses of muscle and tentacles capable of destroying vehicles and entire military formations. They attacked the perimeter while lesser infected creatures continued swarming the pump. Despite the assault, the machine continued operating. Blood tox spread beneath Manhattan. The infected began dying. Then the ground erupted. Elizabeth Greene emerged. Her body was encased within an enormous infected organism known as Mother. A towering mass of biomass formed around her as the blood tox forced the infection out from beneath the city. Mercer attacked. He severed the creature's massive appendages one after another, while Mother repeatedly withdrew underground and resurfaced in increasingly aggressive forms. The battle devastated Times Square as the infected organism attempted to overwhelm him with its size, regenerative ability, and constant attacks. Eventually, Mercer broke through its defenses. Mother collapsed. Elizabeth Greene emerged from the dying biomass. Mercer immediately attacked her and consumed her. For the first time, he gained direct access to Greene's memories. He saw Hope, the experiments, her infection, the birth of PARIAH, her years of captivity, the evolution of Red Light. Everything that had transformed Elizabeth Greene into the center of the outbreak now became part of Mercer's own memory. Greene was dead. Then Mercer intercepted an evacuation order issued by Colonel Ian Taggart. Military forces were withdrawing. Blackwatch units began abandoning the area, and Mercer immediately understood what that meant. The containment operation was entering its final stage. Manhattan itself was now being considered expendable. At Red Crown Command, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Infected forces were overrunning military positions, and General Randall was furious when he learned that Taggart had initiated a retreat without authorization. Randall transferred Blackwatch command operations to the USS Ronald Reagan and ordered the carrier to move away from Manhattan. He then gave Captain Cross 4 hours to locate Taggart and bring him back. It was the last opportunity Randall was willing to offer. As Randall departed aboard a helicopter, an unusual infected organism watched Captain Cross from nearby. Cross drew his electroshock weapon and prepared himself. The contact reached Mercer again. McMullen had gone into hiding. Mercer had come too close too many times, and the Gentek director was now actively avoiding any location where Zeus might reach him. But Blackwatch had not yet realized something important. Mercer was developing resistance to blood tox. That gave him an advantage. According to the contact, there was only one reliable way to force McMullen into the open. Mercer would have to destroy the facility manufacturing blood tox and then deliberately surrender himself. McMullen would never be able to resist the opportunity to examine Zeus personally, and if Mercer allowed himself to be captured, McMullen would order Blackwatch to bring him directly inside. Mercer tried to ask how the mysterious contact knew so much about Blackwatch, Hope, and the origins of the virus, but the connection was terminated before he received an answer. With no other lead, Alex headed for the blood tox production facility. He infiltrated the compound, commandeered a tank, and began systematically destroying the 8 filtration units that kept the facility operational. Blackwatch forces converged on him, but Mercer tore through the defenses until every filter had been destroyed. Then he remembered the second part of the plan. He had to let them capture him. Mercer moved toward one of the large blood tox storage tanks and deliberately placed himself in the blast zone. The resulting explosion engulfed him in toxic gas and debris. He collapsed. A super soldier approached and scanned the body. The readings suggested that Zeus had finally been neutralized. Blackwatch recovered Mercer and transported him to a secure laboratory, directly to Raymond McMullen. Sometime later, Mercer regained consciousness on an operating table. McMullen stood before him. Alex demanded answers. McMullen tried to explain his role in everything that had happened. He did not see himself as a monster or a villain. In his own mind, he had always been a scientist driven by the need to understand the virus. Mercer had repeatedly interfered with that work, but McMullen knew the truth. He knew that Alexander J. Mercer had died at Penn Station. The thing lying on the operating table was not the original man. Blacklight had entered Mercer's corpse, consumed its biological structure, and reconstructed it. The organism had inherited Mercer's appearance, fragments of his personality, and eventually the memories of countless people it consumed. What now called itself Alex Mercer was the virus itself, shaped into the image of a dead man. McMullen also knew that the answer Mercer was searching for reached back to Hope, Idaho, and the experiments of the 1960s. He possessed the final pieces of the story, but he refused to let Mercer take them from him. Before Alex could consume him, McMullen drew a handgun and shot himself in the head. Whatever remained inside his mind died with him. Mercer left the facility and headed toward the third location designated by the contact. This time the phone did not ring. Captain Robert Cross appeared behind him instead. Cross explained that General Randall was preparing to take the containment operation to its final extreme. Randall had witnessed what Red Light had done to Hope decades earlier. He had spent the rest of his career preparing to ensure that such an outbreak could never escape containment again. Now he was prepared to destroy Manhattan completely. Cross offered Mercer a deal. If Alex helped him stop Randall, Cross would help him reach the general and uncover the remaining truth. There was only one way aboard the USS Ronald Reagan, without being destroyed before reaching it. Mercer needed the identity of Colonel Ian Taggart. Randall had ordered Cross to locate the colonel and return him to the carrier. If Mercer consumed Taggart and assumed his appearance, Cross could present him as a prisoner and bring him directly aboard. Taggart, however, was already attempting to escape Manhattan. His first plan involved evacuation by helicopter. Cross provided Mercer with the locations of the aircraft Taggart might use. Mercer moved from one landing zone to another, destroying helicopters before they could escape. Aircraft exploded on the ground and were shot from the sky until Taggart's aerial evacuation network had been eliminated. The colonel switched to his contingency plan. He would break through the quarantine perimeter by land. Taggart gathered loyal Marines and Blackwatch personnel and began preparing a route toward the Brooklyn Bridge. Military checkpoints were established while his forces attempted to clear a path for the convoy. Mercer attacked Taggart's base. He destroyed vehicles, defenses, and personnel throughout the compound, forcing the colonel to flee in a thermobaric tank. Mercer pursued him across the city. Taggart sacrificed his remaining troops to slow the chase, but Mercer continued closing the distance until he finally intercepted him near the Brooklyn Bridge. There was nowhere left to run. Mercer destroyed Taggart's protection, reached the colonel, and consumed him. His appearance, memories, and identity became Alex's own. Disguised as Ian Taggart, Mercer contacted Blackwatch and requested extraction. Cross reported that the colonel was in custody. The two were transported aboard the USS Ronald Reagan. Once aboard the carrier, they descended into the ship's interior and were taken directly to General Peter Randall. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Randall looked at the apparent Taggart and immediately drew his pistol. He fired into his head, then he turned the weapon toward Cross. Randall defended the nuclear option with the same philosophy that had guided Blackwatch for decades. Manhattan had become a festering wound. If sacrificing the island could prevent the infection from spreading across the United States and killing millions more, then he considered the decision justified. Cross argued that civilians were still alive on the island and that other options remained. Randall refused to reconsider. Behind him, Taggart's supposedly dead body began to move. The gunshot wound closed. Mercer returned to his true form. But Randall had already initiated the nuclear weapon. Only minutes remained before detonation. The general claimed that only he possessed the information necessary to stop it. Mercer seized him. Randall was consumed. His memories flooded into Alex. Hope, Greene, Blackwatch, decades of decisions, fear, secrecy, and containment at any cost. Mercer finally gained access to the truth Randall had spent his entire life protecting. But it came too late to prevent the countdown from continuing. Then Cross approached from behind. With strength no ordinary human possessed, he seized Mercer by the throat and lifted him from the floor. Cross revealed his true intention. Once the nuclear weapon detonated, everyone would believe Manhattan and the infection had been destroyed. In the aftermath, no one would be searching for him. If he could consume Mercer before the explosion, he believed he could gain enough power to survive what followed. Then his body began to change. The man standing before Mercer was not Robert Cross. The Supreme Hunter had survived. After its first battle with Mercer, the creature had been reduced to a pool of biomass, but it had eventually regenerated. Later, during the collapse of Blackwatch's position at Battery Park, it encountered Captain Cross, killed him, and consumed him. It had been wearing his identity ever since. His appearance, his memories, his voice, everything. The supposed alliance between Cross and Mercer had actually been engineered by the Supreme Hunter itself. The creature abandoned Cross's form and expanded into its true body. Mercer now faced the same organism he had believed destroyed beneath the core hive. The flight deck of the USS Ronald Reagan became their battlefield. Military personnel, Blackwatch operatives, and helicopters opened fire on the Supreme Hunter, while Mercer engaged it at close range. The creature was stronger than before, having regenerated and evolved since their first encounter. The nuclear countdown continued. Mercer fought through its attacks, tearing into the creature whenever an opening appeared. Once the Supreme Hunter had been sufficiently weakened, Red Crown ordered all remaining military personnel to evacuate the carrier. Alex was left alone with the creature and the bomb. With only minutes remaining, he continued attacking until he finally severed one of the Supreme Hunter's limbs. Then Mercer delivered the final blow. He decapitated it. The Supreme Hunter collapsed. This time it did not rise again. The nuclear countdown was almost complete. Mercer rushed to a helicopter and lifted off from the carrier with the weapon. He flew as far from Manhattan as he could, carrying the bomb out over the Atlantic Ocean. With only seconds remaining, he released it. The nuclear weapon detonated over the water. A blinding flash consumed the horizon. The shockwave struck Mercer's helicopter and obliterated it, throwing his body into the blast. For a time, there was nothing left of Alex Mercer but scattered organic matter. Eventually, a small mass of surviving biomass washed ashore. A crow descended toward it, drawn by the remains. The moment the bird made contact, Blacklight reacted. The biomass seized the animal and consumed it cell by cell. New tissue began forming. Bones, muscle, skin. The shape of a human body slowly reconstructed itself from what had survived the explosion. Alex Mercer rose once again. He was alive. Mercer left New York behind, abandoning the city that had once been his home. He moved on in search of meaning, justification, and perhaps some form of hope. Meanwhile, the official story was already being written. News broadcasts praised the Marines who had given their lives to save millions. The infection had been defeated. The city had survived. The public was told that the danger was over. Senator Abrams addressed the nation. Manhattan survived. The nuclear weapon never reached the city, and the outbreak was brought under control, but the truth about what had happened remained hidden from the public. Officially, Alex Mercer was remembered as a murderer, a monster, and a terrorist responsible for the disaster. No one knew that he had prevented the destruction of Manhattan and saved millions of lives. With the city behind him, and no place left to call home, Mercer disappeared. He began traveling the world, searching for meaning and trying to understand what it truly meant to be human. Alex Mercer began to question what remained of his humanity. A year had passed since he released the Blacklight virus in New York, triggering the outbreak, and later saved the city from nuclear destruction. Yet none of that could erase the thousands of lives lost because of him. He no longer felt human. All that seemed to remain was a name. If he was still human in any meaningful sense, how was he supposed to live? Where could he go? How could he ever become part of humanity again? Mercer left North America and began traveling across the world, searching for something pure, something decent, something that might prove humanity was still worth believing in. In West Africa, he found brutality instead. He witnessed the suffering inflicted by a local warlord and tore the man apart before moving on. Eventually, Mercer reached Moscow. There, he saw the same pattern repeating itself. Different faces, different surroundings, but the same hypocrisy concealed beneath civility and polite appearances. After leaving Russia, he eventually decided to return to the United States. In the American Southwest, he found fear. A drug cartel had taken control of several small border towns, driving out legitimate authority and terrorizing the local population. Mercer destroyed the cartel and freed the townspeople. They celebrated, but only a day later, he saw how quickly they forgot those who had died. Their concern seemed limited to their own survival. Their freedom had become something selfish, celebrated only by those fortunate enough to remain alive. Mercer continued north, but wherever he went, he saw the same qualities: corruption, greed, indifference. At one point, he watched two police officers casually discussing a murder-suicide in which a father had killed his wife and then his son. It was already the third similar case that year, and neither officer seemed particularly affected by it. An emergency medical technician mentioned a strange smell coming from a neighboring house, but the officers refused to investigate. Their shift was nearly over, and checking the property would mean hours of additional paperwork. Inside that house, someone's father had apparently been dead in a chair for nearly 6 weeks. Mercer could barely understand how people could become so indifferent, even toward their own families. Humanity had disappointed him. For the first time, he began seriously questioning whether returning to it was something he even wanted. He was already something different. There was a power inside him that could not simply be ignored. Mercer decided to disappear. He killed several drug dealers, took their money, assumed a new face, and continued north toward a place of snow, forests, and silence. He wanted isolation from the world and, perhaps more importantly, from himself. He adopted a new name, Jack. Under that identity, Mercer rented an isolated cabin from a man named Flint, the owner of a small local sawmill. Flint lived nearby with his daughter, Autumn. Autumn immediately took an interest in the quiet stranger. Mercer introduced himself as a writer working on a book and explained that he needed solitude and silence. At first, he deliberately kept his distance from both of them. Days passed. Gradually, Mercer began to grow attached to the two. Flint proved to be a man of strong principles, honest, hard-working, and deeply devoted to his daughter. Autumn, meanwhile, represented something Mercer had almost stopped believing existed, genuine warmth in a world he increasingly viewed as corrupt. On the 45th day of Mercer's stay, Flint invited him to dinner. They ate stew together and talked quietly. After the meal, Autumn invited Jack to play a game of chess. During the game, Mercer experienced something unfamiliar: warmth, peace. For a brief moment, he wondered whether this was what truly separated a human being from a monster, the ability to form a connection with another person. While Mercer continued living under the identity of Jack and slowly rediscovered emotions he believed he had lost, a car arrived outside the house. No one had visited the property during the entire time he had lived there. A tall, gray-haired man wearing an expensive coat stepped from the vehicle. His name was Zurich. From the moment Mercer saw him, he sensed trouble. After Zurich left, Jack cautiously asked Flint who the man was. Flint reluctantly explained that Zurich was a businessman who had been buying property throughout the area and attempting to take control of everything he could. He was not the kind of man who accepted refusal. Mercer immediately understood that Zurich represented a threat. Later that night, Alex remained awake and heard movement outside the cabin. He already knew what it meant. 2 armed men had arrived with the intention of setting fire to the house. Their conversation made it clear that they also intended to harm Autumn. They never had the chance. Mercer emerged from the darkness behind them. His arm transformed into a blade. He killed both men quickly and without hesitation. When the last one fell, Mercer faced the familiar choice: consume or leave the body behind. He consumed one of them. The man's memories flooded into his mind. His name was Larry. Zurich had given the order. He wanted Flint to suffer. He wanted the land. Mercer clenched his fist. Zurich was threatening the only people who had shown him uncomplicated kindness since he had abandoned New York. They had accepted him. They had treated him like a person. They had given him something resembling the humanity he had been searching for. It did not take Mercer long to learn everything he needed to know about Zurich. He was a businessman with a deeply criminal past who had been acquiring land throughout the region by any means necessary, resorting to violence whenever legitimate methods failed. His current operation was based around the sawmill. Private security already occupied the property, and even a helicopter had been deployed. The site reminded Mercer of Blackwatch. He assumed Larry's appearance and approached the compound. Disguised as the bald enforcer he had consumed, Mercer eliminated the guards at the entrance, crossed the perimeter, and began moving through the facility. He had genuinely tried to live differently. He remembered Flint's cabin, their quiet conversations, the evenings spent with Autumn, the rare but genuine sense of peace. For weeks, Mercer had restrained himself. He had tried to suppress the virus and everything that came with it, but humans had always excelled at killing one another. Their bodies were fragile, their skin tore easily, their bones broke with little effort. Human beings had once stood at the top of the food chain. That had been before Blacklight. Mercer found himself wondering why he was still trying so desperately to feel human. Perhaps the only thing he truly shared with humanity was its capacity for violence. Then the alarm sounded. His thoughts ended immediately. The helicopter lifted into the air. A blinding searchlight swept across the snow, found the intruder, and gunfire immediately followed. Bullets tore into the ground around Mercer, throwing clouds of snow into the air as he charged forward. He leapt onto the helicopter, reached the gunner, and tore him apart. Zurich watched the attack in growing panic. He had no understanding of what he was facing. He fled into the building, but Mercer was already waiting inside. Alex's arm transformed into a blade. With a single strike, he impaled Zurich. Then he consumed him. Zurich's memories revealed a truth Mercer had never expected. Flint was not the man he claimed to be. In his former life, he had been a murderer, an executioner, and a rapist. The honest, hard-working father Mercer had come to respect had once been a monster hiding behind the appearance of an ordinary man. The peaceful life Mercer had begun to believe in suddenly felt like another lie. Consumed by anger, he returned to Flint's cabin and demanded to know where Autumn was. He confronted Flint with everything he had learned: the bloodshed, the crimes, and the deception. Flint did not deny his past. He insisted that he had abandoned that life long ago and had become someone different. Mercer did not accept the explanation. His hands transformed into claws. He killed Flint. Then Mercer rushed back toward the cabin where Autumn was waiting. She still called him Jack. She still believed he was the quiet writer who had entered their lives weeks earlier. Mercer told her they should leave immediately. They could disappear together and begin somewhere else. He opened the hiding place beneath the floorboards where he had stored his money. It was empty. Autumn had taken it. Before Mercer could react, she drew a handgun and shot him in the head. He collapsed. Autumn looked down at the body and admitted that she had known about the hidden money. Despite that, she had wanted to give Jack a chance, because she had grown to love him. But Flint had taught her one lesson she had never forgotten: never trust anyone. Then Mercer rose. The wound in his head closed. He abandoned Jack's appearance and revealed his true form. Autumn barely had time to react before he consumed her. Mercer ran from the cabin and disappeared into the snow. Something inside him had finally broken. Everywhere he had gone, he had searched for proof that humanity possessed something worth returning to. Instead, he believed he had found greed, cruelty, betrayal, selfishness, and hypocrisy. To Mercer, humanity had become worthless. Worse than worthless. Parasites. What enraged him most was how long it had taken him to accept that conclusion. He had spent so much time asking whether he could become human again, whether he could belong among them, whether the emotions he felt toward people such as Dana, Flint, and Autumn proved that some part of him was still one of them. Now he rejected the question itself. Humanity no longer represented something he wanted to become. He had surpassed it. The era of mankind, Mercer decided, was coming to an end. Something new would replace it. Something stronger. A world without disease, without war, without the weaknesses he believed had corrupted humanity from the beginning. Mercer's transformation had not happened in a single moment. Before his death, Alexander J. Mercer had already been an isolated and deeply immoral scientist who placed his work above conventional ideas of morality. When Blacklight reconstructed him after Penn Station, the resulting being inherited his identity and gradually built a new sense of self from Mercer's memories and those of everyone it consumed. He spent the Manhattan outbreak searching for the truth about his existence. Along the way, he protected Dana, fought the creatures created by Gentek and Blackwatch, witnessed the consequences of hope, and ultimately prevented the destruction of New York. After learning what he was, he left the city in an attempt to understand whether he could still live as part of humanity. He traveled across countries and continents searching for evidence that people were better than the worst things he had witnessed. Instead, Mercer increasingly focused on humanity's cruelty. Every betrayal reinforced the next. Every act of violence confirmed what he had begun to believe. His own childhood, isolation, and inability to trust others only strengthened that conclusion. Blacklight had given him extraordinary power, but it had not erased the personality on which his new identity had been built. Eventually, Mercer stopped searching for a place within humanity. He decided to replace it. If the existing world inevitably produced suffering, violence, disease, and betrayal, then he would create a new one, a better species, a better world. And his plan would begin with the creation of a new prototype. Iraq. The war had begun, and American forces were already deep inside the country. For an ordinary soldier like Sergeant James Heller, however, the reasons behind the invasion mattered far less than the orders he had been given. He was a Marine and a reconnaissance soldier. His job was to follow those orders and complete the mission. During one operation, Heller's unit entered another isolated village somewhere in the desert. The locals watched the soldiers with suspicion while children hid behind their parents. The Marines searched houses, checked identification, and looked for weapons. Then came a sudden explosion. A blinding flash filled Heller's vision. Then darkness. James regained consciousness on a cold floor with a bag over his head. A bearded man removed it and introduced himself as Saul Benjamin, a photographer who had been imprisoned there under equally mysterious circumstances. Like Heller, he had no idea why he had been captured. The last thing Benjamin remembered was falling asleep while accompanying a military unit. He had awakened inside the cell and had already been held there for 4 days. During that time, he had seen other prisoners come and go. The previous day, a soldier and a civilian had occupied a nearby cell. Then men wearing military uniforms without identifying insignia arrived. They removed the prisoners one at a time, beat them, and dragged them farther into the facility. Soon afterward, Benjamin heard screams that no longer sounded entirely human. Heller immediately began looking for a way out. He pulled a metal spring from beneath the bed, intending to use it either as a lockpick or as a weapon. As he worked, memories of home surfaced. His wife, Colette. His daughter, Amaya. He remembered sitting beside Amaya one evening and reading her a bedtime story. She leaned against him and asked when her father would finally come home for good. Heller promised that only a few more months remained. Another memory followed. At breakfast, James and Colette discussed their plans for the future. They wanted to open a small family business once his deployment ended. Colette believed they would have little trouble securing a loan when he returned. Heller even suggested a name for the restaurant, Colette's Kitchen. Their conversation was interrupted when Amaya called for her father after finding a spider in the room. Heller examined it and explained that the spider was harmless. It had probably entered the house looking for somewhere cool and was likely just as frightened as she was. Then he taught his daughter a lesson he believed was important. Just because someone had the power to kill something did not mean they had to use it. The memory ended when armed guards arrived outside Heller's cell and ordered the prisoners away from the bars. 3 men entered. One overturned Heller's bed and discovered what he had been planning. Another raised his weapon and ordered the others to take Benjamin away, while Heller would be dealt with later. Benjamin was dragged screaming down the corridor. Heller was left alone. Then, without warning, the cell doors opened. He stepped into the corridor and used the steel spring to tear apart a nearby electrical control panel. Beyond another door, he heard movement. Inside were 3 infected researchers. Heller armed himself with a metal beam and killed them. Whatever had happened inside the facility, he now understood that he was dealing with something far beyond an ordinary military detention site. He continued through the complex and eventually discovered an armory. Heller equipped himself with whatever weapons and ammunition he could carry. Farther ahead, he entered an operating room. A locked cage stood in one corner. Inside were 2 wounded soldiers, Jones and Kelly. Both were badly injured, but still conscious. They called out to Heller and asked for help. He approached the cage and shot the lock open. At that moment, a hunter burst into the room. Heller immediately stepped between the creature and the wounded soldiers. He opened fire with his rifle, repeatedly striking the infected creature before closing the distance and finishing it with the weapon itself. The hunter collapsed. Heller freed Jones and Kelly, and the 3 continued deeper into the facility. They followed a network of cables that appeared to lead through the complex. As they moved, Jones explained what he knew. Scientists controlled the facility. They possessed some kind of virus, the same biological agent connected to the disaster that would later devastate New York. Human beings were being used as experimental subjects. Something had gone wrong, however, and the staff had abandoned the facility, leaving the prisoners and infected subjects behind. The group eventually encountered a scientist named Santos. Jones immediately claimed that Santos was infected and demanded that Heller kill him. Santos was unarmed. He dropped to his knees and begged for his life. Jones insisted that he had personally witnessed infected blood enter the scientist's mouth. To him, Santos was already dead and represented a threat to everyone around him. Heller hesitated. He remembered the lesson he had once taught Amaya. Having the ability to kill someone did not automatically make killing them necessary. He refused to execute Santos and decided to take him with them until they could determine whether he was truly infected. Then Jones suddenly straightened. The wounded soldier had been pretending. He produced a syringe from behind his back and drove it into Heller's neck. Kelly also abandoned the appearance of being injured. The entire situation had been staged. As Heller began losing consciousness, one of them expressed disappointment in his decision. His vision turned white. Then everything disappeared. Heller awakened in a military infirmary. Captain Langford stood beside him. Langford explained that Heller had suffered a gunshot wound to the head during the operation. A sniper's bullet had grazed his skull and deflected rather than penetrating it fully. His fellow Marine, Patterson, had been killed. Heller remembered none of it. The doctors explained that memory loss was possible after such a head injury, but assured him that he would survive. Langford told him that after several more days of recovery, he should be able to return to duty. Heller was given access to a tablet so he could contact his family. Amaya immediately noticed the bandages around her father's head and asked what had happened. Colette was clearly shaken by the news of his injury. James reassured them both. He told them that everything would be all right. While Heller spoke with his family, Captain Langford met outside with Colonel Shawcross. The truth behind the bunker was revealed. Heller had been evaluated as a potential Blackwatch recruit. The prisoners, the scientist, and the choices he had been forced to make had all formed part of the test. Shawcross concluded that Heller had failed. When ordered to kill an apparently infected but unarmed man, he had shown compassion instead. He had refused to follow an order he believed was unnecessary. To Blackwatch, that made him unsuitable. They no longer had any use for him. Heller was returned to the conventional military, but his connection to Blackwatch was far from over. Disillusioned with humanity, Alex Mercer finally abandoned his attempt to understand it. He had tried to become part of the human world. He had searched for something good in people, but everywhere he looked he found fear, betrayal, hypocrisy, greed, and weakness. Eventually, he reached a conclusion. Humanity did not need to be saved. It did not deserve salvation. Humans were the disease. He would become the cure. Mercer returned to the place where everything had begun, Pennsylvania Station, the place where Alexander J. Mercer had died and Blacklight had been born. There, Mercer began the first stage of his plan. He released the Blacklight virus into the station. People barely had time to react before their bodies began changing. The infection spread with terrifying speed, turning Penn Station into the center of another biological catastrophe. Manhattan fell once again. The second outbreak had begun. At the same time, Sergeant James Heller had only a few weeks remaining before the end of his deployment. Then Colette called him. There was fear in her voice. The virus had returned to New York. Blackwatch had once again deployed its forces throughout the city. Reports described new cases of infection, including an incident near Central Park in which a woman had allegedly been killed by what witnesses described as a walking corpse. Gentek publicly confirmed that the attacker had been infected with the Mercer virus, the same pathogen everyone had believed eradicated after the previous outbreak. Every time Colette looked outside, she saw soldiers. Amaya's school had been closed. The authorities were telling residents to remain inside and avoid panic, but Colette did not know what to do. Heller told her to stay home. The following evening, as soon as he was released from duty, he would return to New York, collect Colette and Amaya, and take them away from the city to stay with family. He tried to reassure his wife. Blackwatch had experience dealing with the infection. They knew what they were doing. At least, that was what Heller believed. News reports warned that martial law could be declared within 48 hours, and urged residents to leave New York while evacuation was still possible. There were also unconfirmed reports that Alex Mercer, the man publicly blamed for the previous catastrophe, had been sighted in the city. Heller missed his family more than he could express, but he would be home soon. The next day, James returned to their home. The front door was partially open. He entered. Colette was lying on the floor in a pool of blood. Amaya was nowhere to be found. Heller would later be told that infected creatures had broken through the neighborhood and entered the house. Everything had happened within minutes. Colette had apparently tried to protect their daughter. Amaya was presumed dead as well. James would never hear her laugh again, never hear her call him Dad. He sat beside his wife's body and mourned. Something inside him died there. Only emptiness remained. And one name, Alex Mercer. The man Heller believed had destroyed everything he loved. Overwhelmed by grief and rage, Heller was left with a single purpose: kill Mercer. He voluntarily requested assignment to a cleanup unit operating inside the red zone. Whether he found Mercer or simply died there no longer mattered to him. Heller and his squad entered the ruins of Manhattan aboard an armored personnel carrier. The other Marines openly questioned how long they could possibly survive in the red zone. Heller remained silent. He did not care. Then a wrecked vehicle struck their APC with tremendous force and hurled it across the street. Heller regained consciousness on the pavement. Every other member of his squad was dead. Once again, James Heller had survived. Then he saw him. Alex Mercer was walking among the bodies, studying them as though searching for something. Heller's grief immediately turned to rage. He drew his knife and charged. The blade cut across Mercer's throat. Nothing happened. Mercer threw Heller aside almost effortlessly and began walking away, treating him as little more than an inconvenience. Then Heller saw the photograph that had fallen from his pocket. Amaya. The sight gave him another reason to stand. He attacked Mercer again. This time Mercer still did not kill him. He wanted Heller to follow. Mercer led him deeper into the red zone, into parts of Manhattan where almost nothing remained of the city. A Blackwatch helicopter appeared overhead and warned Heller that he had entered a restricted area. Mercer suddenly launched himself from a nearby building and destroyed the helicopter with a single strike. Then he landed and summoned one of the infected creatures under his control. A Goliath towered behind Heller, an enormous infected organism several stories tall. Mercer had become the central force within the second outbreak's hive mind and could command infected creatures directly. Heller ran. He vaulted across wrecked vehicles and debris before diving through the window of a ruined building. For a moment, he stopped to catch his breath, struggling to comprehend how the infection could create something so enormous. Then another infected creature attacked from behind. This one was smaller, but far faster and more aggressive. Heller had fought monsters before. He narrowly avoided its jaws, drew his Bowie knife, and struck repeatedly before driving the blade directly into the creature's eye. The infected collapsed. Heller rose. Mercer was standing there again. This time, the chase was over. Mercer seized him, pinned him against a wall, and drove an infected tendril directly into Heller's chest. The virus entered his body. This was the next stage of Mercer's plan. He was not merely looking for ordinary infected followers. He wanted exceptional individuals capable of surviving the transformation, people who could become evolved and serve as weapons against Gentek, Blackwatch, and eventually humanity itself. Heller had attracted his attention. A man who had attacked Alex Mercer with nothing but a knife and refused to retreat had demonstrated exactly the qualities Mercer was searching for. Rather than kill him, Mercer gave him the opportunity to become something more. Then he disappeared, leaving Heller behind for Blackwatch to recover. As the infection spread through his body, Heller drifted in and out of consciousness. He remembered the funeral. 2 coffins, one for Colette, one for Amaya. He remembered their voices, their laughter. Then everything faded. A Blackwatch helicopter recovered him and transported him into the yellow zone. When Heller regained awareness, he was restrained inside a Gentek facility. Scientists cut into him, tested him, and subjected his changing body to increasingly brutal experiments while he remained conscious. Colonel Douglas Rooks monitored the procedure. From that moment forward, Heller was Gentek property. Rooks ordered Dr. Anton Koenig to continue the tests. If the subject failed to produce anything useful, the entire chamber was to be incinerated. Koenig objected. Heller was potentially invaluable. Lieutenant Clint Riley intervened and reminded the doctor that Rooks had given an order. The final evaluation began. Koenig decided to start with the most basic biological instinct: self-preservation. The chamber doors opened, releasing a group of infected subjects toward Heller. But James was no longer the man Blackwatch had brought inside. He struck the first infected with enough force to destroy its body. Another attack sent the next creature flying across the chamber. Heller demanded to be released. Rooks responded by ordering 3 more containment doors opened. More infected poured into the room. Heller destroyed them with frightening ease. Rooks had seen enough. He ordered the chamber burned. Flames engulfed Heller. When the fire finally died, 2 soldiers entered to inspect the charred body. They reported no signs of life. Rooks told them to make certain. Blackwatch could not afford another Mercer loose in the city. The soldiers fired several rounds into the body. Heller moved, he seized one of them, and instinctively consumed him. The soldier's biomass flowed into Heller's body, repairing the damage caused by the flames. More infected were released into the chamber. Koenig shouted instructions through the intercom, telling Heller to consume them and use their biomass to regenerate. The flames returned. Heller survived again. Rooks left the facility. He had reached his conclusion and placed the remaining operation under Riley's supervision. Heller tore the operating table from its mountings and hurled it into the reinforced observation window. The glass shattered. He escaped through the opening and broke free of the facility. Gunfire followed him into the streets. Riley ordered his men to fire, but Heller disappeared into the surrounding alleys. Then a living Blackwatch soldier suddenly landed in front of him. Mercer appeared moments later. He told Heller that this was exactly why he had chosen him. Mercer had deliberately infected him with the same virus responsible for the new outbreak, the pathogen that had become publicly known as the Mercer virus. Then Mercer offered his version of the truth. According to him, Gentek and Blackwatch were responsible for the outbreak. They were continuing the same biological weapons research that had produced the previous disaster, experimenting on civilians and concealing the results behind military containment operations. To prove that Blackwatch was not what Heller believed it to be, Mercer presented Lieutenant Mark Simon. He forced Heller to consume the soldier. Memories flooded into James, secrets, experiments, Blackwatch operations, Gentek research, the things they had done to human subjects. Heller now understood that Gentek and Blackwatch were far from innocent. Mercer deliberately used those memories to redirect Heller's hatred toward them. He also explained what Heller had become. Every person he consumed could provide him with biomass, memories, knowledge, skills, and appearances. By absorbing others, Heller could become stronger and infiltrate the organizations controlling the city. But his hatred for Mercer remained. Heller still wanted him dead. Mercer reminded him of what Blackwatch had just done. They had imprisoned him, tortured him, locked him in a chamber with infected creatures, then tried to burn him alive. And Mercer denied responsibility for the deaths of Colette and Amaya. Heller did not yet know the full truth. Mercer himself had deliberately initiated the second outbreak, and when he infected Heller, he gained access to enough of his memories to understand exactly who Colette and Amaya were and what their loss meant to him. Mercer claimed that his immediate objective was to destroy Gentek, destroy Blackwatch, and end the system responsible for the virus. He wanted Heller's help. James agreed to work with him, not because he trusted Mercer, not because he had forgiven him, but because he needed answers. The scene shifts to the streets of the Yellow Zone. Refugees wearing masks huddle around burning trash cans in filthy alleys. Civilians are screened for infection before being allowed into other districts. Some never make it through the checkpoints. Body bags are stacked along the streets. Into this devastated part of New York walks James Heller. As he moves through the crowd, he notices 3 soldiers harassing a group of local artists, using their authority to remind everyone who controls the Yellow Zone. Heller initially tries to ignore them and continue on his way, but one of the soldiers calls after him. Their captain approaches to stop him. Heller responds by punching the man in the face and consuming him in full view of everyone nearby. The soldiers immediately raise the alarm. Reinforcements converge on the area, helicopters arrive overhead, and Heller is forced to run. He assumes the appearance of a Blackwatch commander and uses the disguise to disappear from pursuit. From a nearby rooftop, Heller surveys the neighborhood and spots the church belonging to Father Luis Guerra. He heads toward it. At the entrance, Father Guerra is painting the word "closed" across the boarded-up doors. When he notices a figure approaching, he turns. For a moment, fear crosses his face. He drops to his knees and begins praying. Heller assures him that he has not come to hurt him. The two speak. James explains what has happened to him and asks Guerra for help. The priest knows more about Blackwatch and Gentek than most civilians ever could, and almost all of it is disturbing. After residents of Manhattan began discovering what Blackwatch was doing inside the Yellow Zone, Guerra helped organize a resistance network. His people rescued civilians from Gentek experiments, infiltrated Blackwatch computer systems, and distributed classified information exposing some of the organization's activities. But the resistance had already paid heavily for those actions. Guerra no longer wanted to endanger more people. He refused to help Heller because he feared that another confrontation with Blackwatch would bring retaliation against everyone around him. Heller told him that he could fight them without sacrificing the priest's people. He would prove it. James now began his own campaign against Gentek and Blackwatch. As far as he knew, they had created and cultivated the virus responsible for the outbreak, which meant that in his mind, they were also responsible for the deaths of Colette and Amaya. Guerra provided him with the locations of 2 Blackwatch commanders currently operating near a hospital. Heller went after them. As he moved through the city, an unfamiliar sensation struck him. A pulse seemed to move through his mind, followed by another. He reached the first location and discovered another ability created by his infection: hunting. By sending out a biological pulse and sensing its return, Heller could locate specific individuals even without knowing exactly where they were. He identified the first officer and consumed him. The man's memories revealed one name repeatedly: Rooks. Colonel Douglas Rooks was directly involved. Heller contacted Guerra and asked for the location of the second commander. After consuming him as well, James confirmed that Rooks had been the man issuing orders during his imprisonment and experimentation at the Gentek facility. Heller attempted to locate the colonel directly but failed. For the moment, Rooks remained beyond his reach. While Heller moved across the rooftops searching for leads, Guerra uncovered something else. Blackwatch was preparing a live field test involving captured infected specimens. The test would take place in a populated area of the Yellow Zone. Heller immediately headed for the site. When he reached the entrance to the park, military trucks were already arriving with their cargo. Blackwatch soldiers took up positions around the perimeter. Operation Flytrap was ready to begin. The containment doors opened. A brawler charged into the crowd. The creature tore through civilians before turning toward Heller. James avoided its first attack and countered with overwhelming force. He battered the creature until it could barely defend itself, then seized one of its arms and tore it free. The moment he absorbed the brawler's unique genetic material, his body adapted. His hands transformed into enormous razor-sharp claws. Blackwatch Command ordered the remaining specimens released in an attempt to keep Heller occupied until additional forces could arrive. A second brawler entered the area. Heller killed it as well. Then he turned on the soldiers. With his new claws, he tore through the Blackwatch troops defending the test site. When an APC arrived as reinforcement, Heller seized a nearby rocket launcher and destroyed it. Operation Flytrap collapsed completely. Heller contacted Guerra. The priest had seen enough. James had demonstrated that he could strike directly at Blackwatch, without relying on Guerra's resistance fighters. Father Guerra agreed to help him, and, by extension, Mercer in their campaign to rid New York of Gentek and Blackwatch. Through the BlackNet network, Heller soon gained access to information connected to a classified operation designated Orion's Belt. One of the names associated with the project was Dr. Samuel Billingsley. Using his hunting ability, Heller located Billingsley and consumed him. The scientist's memories revealed the existence of a Gentek facility where entire families were being used as experimental subjects, while researchers studied unusual effects produced by the virus. Heller headed for the facility. Before entering, he assumed another identity. He passed through the security perimeter using military disguises and biometric access systems, then consumed a Blackwatch commander to obtain the clearance he needed. Deeper inside the complex, he quietly eliminated another officer and assumed his appearance, allowing him to enter the laboratory without raising an alarm. There he found Dr. Genovese. Heller consumed him. Another collection of memories flooded into his mind, revealing more of the work Gentek and Blackwatch were conducting on the population of the Yellow Zone. But the information he had uncovered was only the beginning. BlackNet was the encrypted communications network used by Blackwatch to coordinate its operations with Gentek scientists. It functioned as their internal information system, collecting critical intelligence concerning missions, logistics, troop movements, and experiments taking place throughout the green, yellow, and red zones. For Heller, gaining access to BlackNet meant opening a direct window into the activities of both organizations. To access the network, Heller first had to locate and consume specific individuals whose identities and credentials were authorized to use it. Once he possessed the appropriate clearance, he could approach a nearby BlackNet terminal and access information concerning ongoing Blackwatch and Gentek operations. One of those operations was designated Operation Black Tulip. The terminal identified Heller's next target as Corporal Jeffrey Fasolo, Using his hunting ability, James located the soldier and consumed him, gaining access to additional classified information. Fasolo's memories revealed that Gentek had captured another brawler and intended to release it into the streets as part of a live field test. Heller went to the test site. Rather than prevent the creature's release, he allowed Gentek's experiment to proceed. The brawler escaped its containment and immediately began attacking people in the surrounding area. Heller pursued it, weakened it, and ultimately consumed its unique genetic material, further strengthening his own abilities. He returned to Blacknet. The next target was Corporal Tino Antonelli. After consuming him, Heller discovered that a combined group of Gentek scientists and Blackwatch soldiers had entered an underground infected lair to capture specimens for research. James followed them underground. Blackwatch troops were already fighting the infected when he arrived. Heller forced his way through the combat zone and eventually discovered a heavily guarded containment unit. Another brawler was being held inside. By this point, such creatures were no longer unfamiliar to him. Heller defeated and consumed it, absorbing another useful genetic mutation and further enhancing his claws. Blacknet contained numerous similar operations. Each one gave Heller an opportunity to disrupt Gentek and Blackwatch activities, consume valuable targets, and accelerate his own evolution. Over time, these missions made him progressively stronger and better prepared for the enemies waiting ahead. The most important information, however, remained connected to the main investigation. Using intelligence recovered through Blacknet, Heller located a Blackwatch base where Colonel Rooks and Lieutenant Riley were currently stationed. He consumed a Blackwatch soldier, assumed his appearance, and entered the compound. The troops were gathering for a briefing. Heller joined them unnoticed. Colonel Rooks addressed the assembled personnel. Gentek was preparing another series of high-risk field experiments. The company had expanded its testing beyond infected subjects and was now preparing experiments that would place civilians directly in danger. The expected casualties were considerable. A Gentek scientist named Dr. Aubrey Shaffold was leading one of the research teams involved in the program. Blackwatch would be responsible for protecting him until the location of the next test site had been confirmed. The briefing ended and the soldiers began moving out. For a moment, Heller saw an opportunity. Rooks and Riley were standing only a short distance away, discussing details of another classified project. James considered attacking them, but another soldier ordered him to stop lingering and join the deployment. When Heller looked back, both officers were gone. Instead, he was reassigned to guard the Gentek research team. Father Guerra contacted him. Heller explained that Rooks might still be more useful alive than dead. Guerra recognized Shaffold's name. The scientist had worked with Dr. Nathan Bellamy on experiments involving the injection of infected genetic material into healthy civilians. Heller waited for the right moment. Then he abandoned his disguise and attacked. The scientist barely had time to react before James began consuming them, searching their memories for information. One phrase appeared repeatedly: Phase 1. The memories revealed that Shaffold was directly connected to its development. Heller needed to find him immediately. Using his hunting ability, James located the scientist, but arrived just as Blackwatch was evacuating him in an armored personnel carrier. Heller seized a rocket launcher from a nearby soldier and fired. The APC exploded. Shaffold was thrown clear of the wreckage. Heller reached him and consumed him. The scientist's memories gave James his first real glimpse of what Phase 1 involved. He passed the name to Father Guerra and asked him to investigate further. Using another military disguise and instructions obtained from Colonel Rooks, Heller infiltrated the Gentek facility where Phase 1 was being conducted. Deep inside the complex, he finally discovered the true purpose of the project. Gentek scientists were attempting to harvest genetic material from a hydra and use its DNA in human experimentation. According to information obtained by Guerra, prisoners were among the intended test subjects. When Heller entered the containment area, the hydra became violently agitated. The containment system failed. The creature broke free. Heller had no choice but to fight it. The hydra's enormous body and powerful attacks made it considerably more dangerous than the infected creatures he had previously faced. After a prolonged battle, however, Heller weakened it enough to consume it. Another evolutionary adaptation followed. His body developed the tendrils ability. Heller could now launch strands of hardened biomass from his arms, attaching them to enemies, vehicles, and surrounding objects. The tendrils could pull targets together with tremendous force or tear apart military equipment. With the Hydra destroyed and the experiment effectively ruined, Heller left the facility without revealing his identity to the remaining forces. Blackwatch personnel gathered outside, expecting to engage the unidentified hostile responsible for the destruction, but Heller had already disappeared. Later, he intercepted a conversation between Dr. Nathan Bellamy and Dr. David Burke. Bellamy was alarmed by the failure of Phase 1. Burke remained calm. They had recovered enough genetic material from the Hydra to complete the first stage of the project. They were ready to proceed to Phase 2. Bellamy became increasingly afraid that Heller would come after him. Blackwatch therefore arranged to evacuate him to the Green Zone under heavy protection. The effort being made to protect Bellamy confirmed that he knew more than Heller had initially suspected. James immediately pursued the evacuation helicopter. Using his newly acquired tendrils, he attacked the aircraft and brought it down among the surrounding buildings. Bellamy survived. Blackwatch transferred him into an APC and attempted to continue the evacuation by ground convoy. Heller caught them. He destroyed the escort and reached Bellamy. Terrified, the scientist revealed that the true leader of Project Long Shadow was not him. It was Dr. David Burke. The information did not save him. Heller consumed Bellamy and gained access to everything he knew about the program. Father Guerra contacted him again. The priest had re-established communication with a mysterious informant, known only by the codename Athena. She had provided urgent intelligence. Blackwatch was gathering large numbers of civilians at one of its facilities. None of the people taken inside were coming back out. Heller immediately headed for the location. When he arrived, he found another familiar Blackwatch procedure already underway. Civilians were being unloaded from military trucks and taken into the facility for experimentation. Heller attacked. He broke through the perimeter and killed the soldiers guarding the site until the base commander arrived to stop him. The commander was consumed as well. His identity gave Heller access to the deeper sections of the complex and its security systems. Inside, Blackwatch personnel were forcing civilians into a chamber containing another experimental infected organism. Heller entered the room. The creature was enormous, heavily armored, and already feeding on one of the test subjects. It attacked immediately. Unlike the faster brawlers, the creature relied on its mass and brute strength. Its enormous arms struck with enough force to shatter the surrounding environment, and it hurled debris at Heller whenever he attempted to keep his distance. James eventually overwhelmed it. He consumed the creature. His body changed again. Both of his arms transformed into massive biological shields capable of absorbing heavy weapons fire and protecting him from powerful attacks. Heller eliminated the remaining Blackwatch forces and escaped the facility. Athena soon transmitted another set of coordinates. Phase 2 was approaching, and Heller was getting closer to the man responsible for it. But before that investigation continued, another story was unfolding elsewhere in New York Zero. It was the story of the survivors. As the title suggests, this story follows a group of survivors struggling against the horrors that have once again consumed Manhattan. Unlike Mercer or Heller, these are ordinary people caught inside the catastrophe, trying to stay alive while the world around them collapses. The story begins in the Red Zone. The streets have become a living nightmare. Buildings lie in ruins. Hordes of infected creatures roam between gunfire and explosions. The civilians who failed to evacuate during the original 48-hour window now run desperately through the destruction, searching for any place where death has not yet found them. At the center of the story is Conrad Stevens, an aging former police officer who has spent the last 3 weeks hiding from two enemies at once, the infected and Blackwatch. In the Red Zone, Blackwatch no longer makes any meaningful distinction between infected civilians and uninfected survivors. There are no screenings and few warnings. Anyone encountered inside the containment area can simply be treated as a threat. Hidden in the basement of an abandoned building, Conrad writes a letter to his wife, Maddie, in case she eventually discovers that he never made it out. For 3 weeks, he has done little except hide. But after witnessing what Blackwatch did to the last group of survivors they discovered, Conrad realizes that remaining underground will eventually kill him just as surely as attempting to escape. He decides to leave the red zone. 2 other survivors have joined him: Marcy, an art student, and 13-year-old Amy Levin. They have begun relying on Conrad for protection, while Conrad himself continues holding on to the belief that Maddie is still alive. He believes there must be a way out of Manhattan. If he can reach it, he intends to make his way to Arizona and find his wife. He has no idea whether the infection has spread that far, or even what remains beyond New York, but the possibility of seeing Maddie again is enough to keep him moving. From the basement window, Conrad watches a large group of infected race through the street. Blackwatch soldiers immediately open fire. Their attention shifts toward the creatures. This is their opportunity. Conrad, Marcy, and Amy leave the basement and run. The younger survivors follow him without hesitation, praying that he knows where he is going. A walker suddenly emerges from behind a vehicle and blocks their path. Conrad strikes it in the head with a metal pipe and kills it. The 3 continue running until they reach cover behind a dumpster, where they stop briefly to catch their breath and determine their next move. Several blocks later, they reach a Blackwatch helicopter landing zone. For Conrad, it represents their only realistic way out of the red zone. He makes Marcy promise that she will not move until he gives the signal. Once he does, she must take Amy and follow him immediately. One mistake will kill all 3 of them. Blackwatch possesses equipment capable of detecting infected organisms, but the soldiers guarding the landing zone are not expecting ordinary survivors to attempt an infiltration. Conrad approaches one of the pilots from behind and incapacitates him. He empties a large container of biological samples and uses the crate as a hiding place for himself, Marcy, and Amy. The plan is extremely dangerous, but there is no better alternative. The container is loaded aboard a Blackwatch helicopter. No one notices the missing pilot or suspects that 3 civilians are hiding among the cargo. After spending a long time cramped inside the container, Conrad finally emerges. He silently approaches the crew, incapacitates a scientist aboard the helicopter, and orders the pilot to fly them out of New York. The pilot fights back. During the struggle, the helicopter is thrown off course. Radio operators repeatedly warn that the aircraft has deviated from its assigned flight path. Seconds later, it crashes onto the roof of a building. For a moment, Conrad believes he has died. He thinks he has failed Maddie. He thinks Marcy and Amy are dead. But all 3 survive. They climb from the wreckage and look out across the surrounding district. They have reached the yellow zone. After spending weeks inside the red zone, the site almost resembles another world. But Conrad knows they are still far from safe. Blackwatch will investigate the crash. They have to keep moving. Conrad continues composing his letter to Maddie, describing how hard he has tried to keep the others alive, and how, despite everything they have endured, he has only managed to travel part of the way toward her. He remembers something Maddie once told him. The only way to accomplish anything difficult was to keep working at it. Conrad intends to do exactly that until he finds her. For the next 3 days, Conrad, Marcy, and Amy hide inside the yellow zone. During that time, Conrad manages to establish contact with the resistance network connected to the mysterious informant known as Athena. From an abandoned building, Conrad begins observing a nearby field camp, operated by Blackwatch and Gentek researchers. Then something goes wrong. Civilians begin screaming. Experimental infected creatures are released into the area and tear through everyone around them. Blackwatch soldiers are killed alongside the civilians, and the remains of the dead are loaded into trucks. Athena warns Conrad to stay off the streets, but Conrad spent 23 years as a police officer. He knows the city, and he can no longer simply watch. He promised himself that he would escape and return to Maddie. While Blackwatch forces are occupied fighting the infected, Conrad steals a Gentek transport vehicle. He and Marcy obtain protective suits, while Amy is presented as a prisoner under their supervision. Conrad keeps the unconscious driver under control and approaches a nearby helicopter landing zone. The guards allow them through without conducting a detailed inspection. Their deception works. The 3 are loaded aboard an aircraft bound for the green zone. From the air, the district appears almost peaceful. After everything Conrad has witnessed, it resembles paradise. For the first time in weeks, he allows himself to imagine reaching Maddie. He imagines Marcy and Amy finding surviving friends or relatives. They have made it through the red zone and the yellow zone. They survived, but their escape is not over. The moment the helicopter lands, Blackwatch personnel surround them. Lieutenant Clint Riley is waiting. Conrad, Marcy, and Amy are arrested and taken into custody. Riley personally interrogates Conrad Stevens. Conrad attempts to justify the Blackwatch soldiers he killed while escaping the red zone. Riley points out that Conrad also brought a young woman and a 13-year-old boy with him, effectively making them accomplices to everything he had done. He asks what Conrad had hoped to accomplish. Conrad explains that he only wanted to leave New York and reach his wife. Marcy and Amy simply wanted to survive. He had killed Blackwatch soldiers because he had already witnessed what the organization did to civilians discovered inside the red zone. Riley appears almost impressed. Conrad managed to bypass Blackwatch security across multiple containment zones and bring 2 civilians with him. Riley offers him a deal. Cooperate with Blackwatch, and they will help him see his wife again. Conrad agrees. For the moment, the 3 survivors are locked inside a holding cell. They are told that they will not remain there for long. Conrad allows himself to believe that they have finally succeeded. Outside the cell, however, a Gentek doctor has listened to the interrogation. He tells Riley the truth. Madeleine Stevens had returned to New York earlier than expected because she wanted to surprise her husband. She had already been dead for several weeks. Conrad's entire journey had been built around reaching a woman who was no longer alive. Riley shows little concern. What matters to him is whether Conrad, Marcy, and Amy meet the requirements for Project Orion. The doctor confirms that they do. They are ideal subjects. For the survivors, reaching the green zone has not brought freedom. It has only delivered them directly into the hands of Gentek and Blackwatch. Elsewhere, Father Guerra contacts Heller in a panic. Blackwatch has discovered his connection to James, and troops are already converging on the church. They are not coming to negotiate. Heller immediately races toward the building. By the time he arrives, Blackwatch soldiers are already firing on the church. James attacks the first wave before they can overwhelm the position. But more forces arrive. Armored personnel carriers equipped with missile systems move into the area. Heller tears a launcher from one of the vehicles and turns the weapon against the rest of the Blackwatch armor, destroying the vehicles one after another. Helicopters arrive overhead and deploy additional troops carrying rocket launchers. Heller brings them down as well. When the final attackers have been eliminated and the gunfire finally stops, James returns to the church. He finds Father Guerra sitting among the debris. The priest is trembling and emotionally exhausted. He blames himself for everything that has happened. He believes he failed the people who depended on him and allowed fear to control his decisions. Heller refuses to accept that. He reassures Guerra and gives him Blackwatch equipment that can help conceal his identity during his escape. For the moment, the priest has survived. But Blackwatch now knows exactly whose side he has chosen. Later, Father Guerra contacted Heller and told him that he was heading for the Green Zone, the safest remaining section of New York Zero. From there, he intended to begin the next stage of their campaign against Gentek and Blackwatch. Heller promised to join him later. First, there was still work to finish in the Yellow Zone. His next Blacknet assignment was Operation Clean Sweep. Heller tracked down and consumed Corporal Stanley Blackjack Carter, who had been operating near Guerra's church. Carter's memories gave him access to classified Blackwatch patrol routes. When a helicopter carrying the relevant intelligence crashed, Heller reached the wreckage and recovered the containers before Blackwatch reinforcements could secure them. The next assignment was Operation Manticore. Heller identified and consumed Dr. David Castleman, a scientist closely connected to Blackwatch operations. The information taken from him revealed another Gentek program. Researchers were attempting to develop biological weapons using material harvested from dead infected organisms. Heller began dismantling the operation. He eliminated the scientists involved, tracked down Lieutenant Cletus Ransom, and eventually entered an infected hive, where Ransom's Alpha team had prepared an ambush for him. The trap failed. Heller destroyed the soldiers and brought another Blackwatch operation to an end. After repeatedly sabotaging Gentek and Blackwatch throughout the Yellow Zone, James realized that destroying patrols, laboratories, and individual researchers would never be enough. People such as Dr. Anton Koenig and Dr. David Burke were still directing projects from behind the scenes. Now operating from the Green Zone, Guerra sent Heller coordinates supplied by Athena. They led to Koenig. Heller infiltrated Koenig's base under a military disguise. Once inside, he released infected specimens into the facility, eliminated the resulting threats, and continued toward Koenig's office. But when the two finally met, Koenig was not afraid. He was pleased to see him. Koenig claimed that Gentek had forced him to participate in Project Orion, a program designed to create a new generation of super soldiers capable of fighting beings such as Mercer and Heller. The program built upon earlier attempts at developing enhanced soldiers, but the new subjects were intended specifically to counter viral organisms with prototype-level abilities. Koenig gave Heller the coordinates of the primary Orion facility and allowed him to leave. At the site, the doctor contacted him remotely and instructed him to begin by destroying the communications infrastructure linking the installation to Blackwatch Command. Heller eliminated the communication towers one after another. Once the base was isolated, the first Orion soldier entered the battlefield. The man had volunteered for the program after, being told that Heller had killed members of his unit. His body had been transformed into a heavily armored biological weapon, capable of matching infected creatures in close combat. Heller defeated him. More Orion soldiers were released as James continued destroying the remaining installations around the base. They failed as well. By the time Heller left, the facility had been devastated. He then intercepted a conversation involving Dr. Burke. Burke revealed that the project was not over. Another group of Phase 2 soldiers remained at a separate proving ground. Gentek still possessed the means to reproduce their enhanced subjects and continue the program. Heller ordered Koenig to investigate Phase 2 and contact him as soon as he discovered anything useful. Several hours later, Koenig called. He had found the proving ground. He also revealed the truth about Phase 2. The serum being used on the new Orion subjects contained genetic material taken directly from James Heller, while Gentek had held him captive. Heller headed for the facility. There he encountered a new kind of enemy. The Phase 2 super soldier possessed strength and abilities derived partially from Heller's own DNA and was even capable of speaking with his voice. The two fought. Heller eventually overwhelmed the soldier and consumed him. Then something went wrong. His body suddenly stopped responding. James collapsed. When he regained consciousness, he was surrounded. Blackwatch soldiers stood around him alongside tanks, helicopters, and super soldiers. The entire force had gathered to witness what they believed would be Heller's destruction. Instead, another ability awakened inside him. Heller released an enormous burst of accumulated biomass. The Devastator tore through everything surrounding him. Soldiers were thrown aside. Vehicles were destroyed. The proving ground erupted into chaos. Then the containment cages opened. Brawlers joined the battle. Even together, however, the infected creatures, Blackwatch forces, and Orion soldiers could not stop Heller. He destroyed them all. Dr. Burke attempted to escape during the destruction. Heller caught him. He consumed the scientist and discovered the truth. Koenig had betrayed him. The doctor had never truly been helping Heller. He had been observing him, collecting biological data, identifying his strengths and weaknesses, and waiting for an opportunity to destroy him. Heller immediately went after Koenig. The scientist continued pretending to be an unwilling victim of Gentek, denying any responsibility for the experiments. Then 2 attack helicopters arrived and opened fire on Heller. The deception was over. James destroyed the aircraft, consumed another Blackwatch commander, and extracted the location of Koenig's primary base from his memories. The facility was heavily defended. Heller broke through anyway. Once the defenses collapsed, Koenig attempted to escape aboard a gunship. Heller brought the aircraft down. He reached the crash site and found the doctor still alive. Then Koenig revealed what he truly was. His body transformed. He was evolved, one of Mercer's creations. Koenig attacked Heller with powers similar to those possessed by Mercer himself. Throughout the battle, he insisted that he represented something superior, and that Heller was nothing more than a mistake. Heller defeated him. Then he consumed him. Koenig's memories revealed another layer of Mercer's plan. Alex appeared soon afterward. Heller demanded to know why Mercer had never told him that others like them existed. Mercer explained that it had always been part of the plan. Evolved agents had already infiltrated both Gentek and Blackwatch. Mercer had personally infected them and placed them throughout the organizations from within. He was building an army. Once that army was ready, Mercer intended for Heller to stand beside him. Together, they would destroy Gentek and Blackwatch. Heller asked about the virus. That was supposed to be destroyed as well. For a moment, Mercer seemed to have forgotten that part of their agreement. Then he assured James that everything would be eliminated, exactly as promised. Heller no longer believed him. Before the confrontation could continue, Father Guerra contacted him. Something important had happened in the green zone. Heller needed to come immediately. Guerra explained how he had escaped the yellow zone by bribing a pilot. Heller chose a different method. He tracked down Sergeant Jenkins, consumed him, acquired his identity and piloting knowledge, and flew to the green zone. After the short flight, he arrived in the last relatively secure region of New York Zero. The green zone remained largely under military control. Although infected creatures occasionally penetrated the district through tunnels and other routes connected to the red zone, it was still home to much of Blackwatch and Gentek's senior personnel and infrastructure. Heller landed and contacted Guerra. They met at the priest's new safe house. There, Guerra showed him security footage recovered from Pennsylvania Station. The recording left no room for doubt. Alex Mercer entered the station. Then he deliberately released the virus. Mercer himself had started the second outbreak. Heller's suspicions were finally confirmed. As far as James was concerned, Mercer was responsible for the deaths of Colette and Amaya. Their alliance was over. Now Heller intended to stop him. There was one immediate lead, Sabrina Galloway. Koenig had previously identified her as an important Gentek executive and a potential candidate for greater authority within the corporation. Heller believed she might know more about Mercer's infiltration of Gentek and his true intentions. He headed toward a Blackwatch base where Lieutenant Riley was expected to conduct a briefing concerning her. The briefing was delayed when infected forces attacked nearby positions. Heller was assigned an APC and ordered to help clear an infected park. Using the vehicle's guided missiles, he destroyed the creatures occupying the area and secured the position. Once the fighting ended, Riley conducted the briefing remotely. Unaware that Heller was listening under a stolen identity, Riley revealed Sabrina Galloway's current location. He also revealed something else. James Heller and Father Guerra were now both priority Blackwatch targets. Before pursuing Galloway, Heller returned once more to BlackNet. The next assignment was Operation Keyhole. His first target was Dr. Marcella Walsh. Heller located and consumed her, gaining intelligence concerning shipments of mutagen being transported through the green zone. One of the helicopters carrying the material subsequently crashed, scattering containers of mutagen across nearby rooftops. Heller recovered the cargo before Blackwatch could secure it. BlackNet then identified another target, Sergeant Emery MacDonald. MacDonald was involved in the development and deployment of Blackwatch's Heavy Grizzly weapons platform. Heller consumed him. From MacDonald's memories, he learned that Blackwatch was preparing further modifications to its M1 Abrams tanks, expanding the heavy military assets being deployed throughout New York Zero. Gentek and Blackwatch were continuing to strengthen their forces, but Heller was now searching for something far more important than another military experiment. Sabrina Galloway might finally lead him to the truth about Alex Mercer's endgame. Heller infiltrated the base and unleashed a devastating attack, destroying vehicles and military infrastructure as he continued dismantling Blackwatch's operations. His next objective was Sabrina Galloway. He tracked her to her office. Galloway showed no fear when Heller confronted her. She already knew who he was and what he wanted. Rather than fight, she offered him a deal, her assistance in exchange for her life. Sabrina revealed that she was one of Mercer's evolved, but her mutation gave her an unusual advantage. She could sense and track others of her kind. There were only two exceptions she could not locate, Heller himself and an evolved named Roland. She offered to help James find him first. Heller had little interest in trusting her, but if her information allowed him to eliminate more of Mercer's evolved, he was willing to cooperate. Using intelligence supplied by Galloway, Heller infiltrated a Blackwatch evacuation unit by assuming the appearance of one of its soldiers. The unit had been ordered to clear infected areas and evacuate high-value Gentek personnel. Roland was believed to be hiding among those VIPs. Heller moved with the unit through streets infested with walkers, brawlers, and hydras, maintaining his disguise throughout the operation. When the team finally reached the evacuation targets, Heller discovered that he could not determine which of them was Roland, so he began consuming them, one after another. Eventually, Roland revealed himself. He immediately recognized Heller as a traitor to Mercer's cause, struck him down, and escaped before James could finish the fight. When Heller regained consciousness, Sabrina contacted him and assured him that she would locate Roland again. Roland himself soon called James. He condemned Heller for using the power Mercer had given him against the very people who were supposed to become part of their new world. Whatever Roland was planning, it was clear that he now considered Heller an enemy. Father Guerra then contacted James with another development. Blackwatch was preparing to distribute a treatment known as white light, supposedly a cure for the Mercer virus. Commander Keith Gallagher was overseeing the deployment. The existence of a genuine cure sounded almost too convenient, and Guerra urged Heller to investigate before Blackwatch released it throughout the city. Heller found Gallagher preparing the operation. He attempted to consume the commander. Gallagher resisted. He was evolved. Another of Mercer's infiltrators. Gallagher fled, beginning a pursuit across streets and rooftops. Eventually, he commandeered a helicopter and attempted to escape by air. Heller tore a missile launcher from nearby military equipment and brought the aircraft down. Gallagher survived the crash and confronted him directly. The two evolved fought, but Heller ultimately overwhelmed the commander and consumed him. His body adapted once again. One of Heller's arms transformed into a massive serrated blade, but the ability was less important than Gallagher's memories. White light really had been developed as a treatment for the virus, yet Mercer's evolved were actively protecting the operation. Something did not make sense. Heller needed to determine why. He continued disrupting Blackwatch through BlackNet. One of the next dossiers was Operation Jack of All Trades. Heller began by tracking Lieutenant Barry Pollock, a Blackwatch officer involved in helicopter operations specifically designed to suppress him. James intercepted and destroyed multiple helicopter teams assigned to hunt him, eliminating the immediate threat. He then located and consumed Private Dane Fontenot, a soldier responsible for gathering intelligence about Heller's biological weaknesses. A helicopter carrying classified information subsequently lost its cargo over the city. Heller began collecting the scattered documents. Before he could retrieve the final package, one of Mercer's evolved seized it and fled. James pursued him through the streets. The evolved attempted to escape with the intelligence, but Heller eventually caught and consumed him before the information could be delivered. BlackNet then directed Heller toward Dr. Edward Carolino, the head of Gentek Security Innovation. Heller located and consumed him. Carolino's memories led James toward another Gentek facility where researchers had been attempting to weaponize captured infected creatures. The experiment had already gone wrong. Brawlers had escaped containment and were tearing through the base. Heller entered during the chaos, destroyed the escaped creatures, eliminated the remaining security forces, and consumed the scientist directing the weaponization program. Another Gentek operation was dismantled. The next BlackNet dossier was Operation Red Glacier. Its first target was Dr. Ben Langham. Langham had been studying the feeding behavior of infected organisms, attempting to understand how creatures that had once been human could survive almost entirely on flesh. Heller found and consumed him. The information led to a Blackwatch facility preparing to release a brawler and a spiked brawler for observation. Heller released both specimens himself and pursued them through the city before killing them near the boundary of the red zone. He then returned to BlackNet. Another target appeared. Sergeant Lance Bertram, a Blackwatch APC driver, possessed information concerning new armored vehicles equipped with experimental biomass scanners. If perfected, the scanners could make it far more difficult for Heller to infiltrate military positions. James destroyed the prototype vehicles before the technology could enter wider production. Blackwatch gunships arrived to defend the program. Heller brought them down as well, and consumed the engineer responsible for developing the scanners. 2 more Blackwatch experiments had been eliminated. Sometime later, Sabrina Galloway contacted him again. She had found Roland. He was hiding inside an infected lair. Heller went after him. As James approached, Roland demonstrated his own remarkable mobility and disappeared inside the infected structure. Almost immediately, a massive hydra erupted from the lair. Heller destroyed the creature and entered. Inside, Roland had already assumed another Blackwatch disguise. Once again, he refused to confront James directly. Instead, he fled and left another enormous infected creature behind to stop him. This one was heavily armored and built like a living tank. Heller fought, and eventually consumed it. The absorption unlocked another mutation, hammer fists. His arms transformed into enormous masses of hardened biomass, capable of smashing armored vehicles and crushing groups of enemies with overwhelming force. When Heller emerged from the lair, Blackwatch forces were waiting for him. He immediately tested his new ability, crashing down among the soldiers with enough force to scatter them across the battlefield. Roland fled again. This time he hid inside a tank. Heller destroyed the vehicle and forced him into the open. Roland knew he had reached the end, but he continued fighting. His body could generate defensive spikes, erupting from his skin in violent bursts whenever Heller approached. It was not enough. James defeated him. He drove his claws into Roland and consumed him. Roland's memories revealed another meeting with Mercer. Alex had asked whether their operation faced any serious problems. Roland assured him that everything was under control. The remaining white light stockpiles would soon be moved out of the green zone. The cure was clearly central to Mercer's plans. Father Guerra soon provided another lead. Colonel Rooks had transferred Koenig's former research personnel into the green zone and placed Dr. Karen Archer in charge of the program. Given everything they had already discovered, Guerra suspected that Archer might also be evolved. Heller infiltrated a Blackwatch briefing under disguise and was assigned to protect Archer's research team. It was the perfect opportunity to investigate them. Instead, Heller eliminated and consumed the entire team. None of them were infected. Their memories contained nothing that explained Archer's role. The attack created another problem. After learning that Archer's personnel had been killed, Lieutenant Riley mobilized a large armored force to eliminate Heller once and for all. James commandeered one of their tanks and turned it against the others. One vehicle after another was destroyed until he reached Riley himself. The lieutenant had finally run out of places to hide. Heller consumed him. Assuming Riley's appearance and voice, James contacted Colonel Rooks and successfully impersonated the lieutenant. During the conversation, he learned that Dr. Archer had disappeared. Meanwhile, another attempt was being made to revive Project Orion. BlackNet identified the operation as Vivid Future. The man overseeing the Orion Revival project was Dennis Wayne. Heller went after him. Wayne immediately revealed that he too was evolved. He attacked James and demonstrated abilities far beyond those of an ordinary Gentek researcher. Heller defeated and consumed him. A helicopter transporting Wayne's research subsequently crashed, scattering containers filled with Orion data across the surrounding rooftops. James recovered the material before Blackwatch could reclaim it. Without Wayne or his research, the Orion Revival project collapsed. But Vivid Future contained more targets. The next was Dr. Soren Donnell. Heller located the scientist under military protection, consumed him, and escaped. Soon afterward, Gentek researcher Dr. Kishino contacted field teams Gamma 1 and Gamma 2, which had been deployed to infected areas to conduct biological scans. Heller attacked the first team. Then he went after Gamma 2. There, Kishino and several of his personnel revealed their true forms. They were evolved. By now, Heller had become accustomed to fighting Mercer's infiltrators. He destroyed and consumed them. Each one gave him more memories, more information, more evidence that Mercer's agents had penetrated nearly every level of Gentek and Blackwatch. Only one important lead remained: Dr. Harry Gutierrez, the last person known to have been connected directly to Archer. Rooks unknowingly provided Heller with Gutierrez's last known location. James arrived and found 3 Blackwatch soldiers. Everything appeared normal. Then one of the men suddenly reacted to Heller's presence. The soldier touched one of his comrades with a finger. The victim began convulsing. Seconds later, his body exploded. Tendrils of biomass erupted from the corpse and violently pulled surrounding objects and people toward it. The attacker was another evolved. While Heller watched the effect of the mutation, the creature escaped. James immediately activated his hunting ability and pursued him. The evolved resisted fiercely, repeatedly using infected humans as living explosives. Eventually, Heller cornered and consumed him. Another ability became his own, biobomb. James could now infect living targets with unstable viral biomass, turning them into biological explosives, capable of dragging everything around them into the detonation. The consumed evolved had been carrying a message from Gutierrez to another of Mercer's agents stationed inside a military base. Heller went there immediately. He landed among the Blackwatch forces and tested his new ability against them. Another evolved appeared. James consumed him as well. The memories confirmed that Gutierrez was working for Mercer, and white light was no longer simply a cure. Heller went after the doctor. Gutierrez seemed almost amused when James confronted him. Knowing that he could not defeat Heller alone, he summoned 2 more evolved. His caution was justified. Heller killed all 3. Gutierrez's memories finally revealed the truth. Mercer had corrupted white light. Dr. Karen Archer, acting on his orders, had introduced Mercer's blood into the cure. The compound originally designed to stop Blacklight had been transformed into a delivery system for it. White light was now capable of infecting those exposed to it, turning some into evolved, transforming others into ordinary infected, and simply killing those whose bodies could not survive the process. Mercer intended to use the cure itself to spread his infection. Heller now needed to find Archer. Rooks provided another lead without realizing who was listening. Archer had returned to a facility containing the last untouched white light storage tanks. Heller went there. He began destroying the stockpiles to force Archer out of hiding. The facility filled with contaminated gas. Archer was forced to deactivate the ventilation system before the concentration became dangerous even to her. Then she revealed her true form. She was evolved. Archer attacked the nearby soldiers and confronted Heller directly. When the battle turned against her, she called infected brawlers to her aid. More followed, and then more. Heller fought through the creatures and eventually defeated Archer herself. He consumed her. The absorption unlocked another ability, Pack Leader. Heller could now tap into the infected hive mind and summon a group of brawlers to fight under his command. A Blackwatch unit was waiting outside the facility. Heller immediately turned his newly acquired pack against them. Later, James met with Father Guerra to determine their next move. Athena believed Mercer's evolved intended to use Blackwatch's own infrastructure to distribute the corrupted white light. There was still one question they needed answered. What exactly would happen when ordinary people were exposed to the altered compound? Athena provided the location of a small white light reservoir. Heller went there to conduct a test. He released a small amount of the gas around several Blackwatch soldiers. The result was immediate. 3 of the men transformed into unstable evolved. Others died. Some became ordinary walkers. There was no cure left in white light. Mercer's blood had turned it into a viral weapon capable of spreading blacklight through the population on a massive scale. Heller finally understood what Mercer intended. Father Guerra contacted him with the location of a much larger white light stockpile. It had to be destroyed before the contaminated compound could be released throughout the city. Heller prepared to move. Then someone appeared before him.
Mercer!
Not often that I'm this disappointed in someone, Sergeant Heller. You've disrupted my plans, wasted all that white light. Now everything I planned for you, everything I've given you, you're not even capable of appreciating it.
I don't know what the fuck you're talking about!
Such a waste. Goodbye, Heller.
You can't kill me. You can't kill me, motherfucker! All right then. Let's see if that goes both ways.
It would have been quick, but now I'm gonna make you suffer.
Then he activated his contingency plan. He sent a Goliath toward the white light reservoir. The enormous, mindless creature had only one purpose: destroy the storage tanks and release their contents. Heller intercepted it before it could reach the facility. The battle was brutal. The Goliath's size and strength made it one of the most dangerous creatures James had faced, but he eventually tore it apart and consumed it before it could rupture the white light tanks. The immediate threat had been stopped. Then Father Guerra called. The infected were already breaking into his safe house. Heller ran as fast as he could. By the time he reached the building, it was over. Luis Guerra was dead. His body lay inside the ruined apartment, surrounded by blood and debris. Nearby, a damaged phone began ringing. Heller answered. A woman was on the other end. Dana Mercer, Alex Mercer's sister. She revealed that she had been Athena all along, the mysterious resistance leader who had been supplying intelligence to Guerra and helping survivors throughout the Yellow Zone. Now she had something far more important to tell James. Amaya was alive. Heller left Guerra's body behind. There was nothing he could do to bring the priest back. Finding his daughter mattered more than anything else now. Dana was somewhere inside the red zone. Blackwatch had already discovered that Athena was Mercer's sister, which meant they were searching for her as well. Heller had to reach her first. He found a Blackwatch pilot, consumed him, assumed his identity, and joined the operation hunting Dana. Using the pilot's voice and credentials, he took control of a helicopter and flew directly into the red zone. The ruined heart of Manhattan waited below, the place where everything had begun, and where it would eventually end. Blackwatch had deployed a mobile tracking unit capable of locating Dana's signal. Without the vehicle, they would have no way to find her. Heller therefore continued pretending to be one of them. He provided air support as the tracking vehicle moved through the devastated streets. The infected attacked immediately. Brawlers rushed the convoy. Juggernauts followed, enormous living battering rams capable of crushing vehicles beneath their weight. Then hydras emerged, hurling chunks of concrete toward the helicopters from a distance. Heller used the aircraft's weapons to destroy them one after another. Then the ground began to shake. A Goliath appeared. The tracking vehicle could no longer be saved. The engineers inside, however, still carried the signal data. Heller evacuated them and transported the survivors to a nearby Blackwatch base. One of the engineers managed to decode Dana's location before the equipment was lost. Blackwatch immediately issued an order to eliminate her. Heller had no intention of following it. Since Blackwatch now possessed Dana's contact information, James called her first. She arranged a meeting. Heller found her inside an old abandoned apartment. Dana immediately confirmed what she had told him over the phone. Amaya was alive. James wanted to move immediately. He was prepared to tear through the entire city if that was what it took to reach his daughter. Dana stopped him. Acting blindly would only make things worse. She would work on locating Amaya, while Heller continued dismantling the threats around them. Dana had already discovered unusual activity several districts away. Blackwatch forces were gathering in large numbers around one of their installations. Heller investigated. What he found surprised him. Blackwatch was destroying the remaining white light stockpiles. They had finally discovered that Mercer had corrupted the compound, and that continuing to distribute it would only accelerate the outbreak. For once, Heller and Blackwatch wanted the same thing. James temporarily fought alongside them. He helped defend the disposal operation from infected creatures and evolved, while Blackwatch personnel transported white light containers toward incinerators. The last shipment eventually arrived. Several containers fell from the vehicle along the way, forcing Heller to recover them and throw them into the furnace himself. The final canister disappeared into the flames. The remaining white light stockpile was gone. Then Blackwatch opened fire on him. Their temporary alliance ended immediately. Heller escaped before they could surround him. Dana called soon afterward. Destroying the stockpile had dealt Mercer another significant setback, and for the moment, Amaya remained safe. Then the connection was interrupted. Sabrina Galloway appeared on the line. She had information concerning Project Firehawk. She sent Heller coordinates and demanded that he meet her immediately. Before following that lead, James continued working through BlackNet. With Father Guerra dead, Dana became the primary voice guiding him through these operations. The next assignment was Operation Spotted Cat. Gentek was developing what it called a predator antigen, a specialized biological weapon intended to identify and kill Heller. The project was nearing completion. The first lead was Dr. Qureshi. Heller found the scientist fleeing from infected walkers and consumed him. Qureshi's memories revealed the locations of Gentek field teams working on the antigen. They were extracting genetic material from a decomposing Goliath in an attempt to complete the formula. Heller destroyed the research teams before they could finish their work. The next target was Sergeant Raoul Whitehead, who was responsible for security at one of Gentek's storage facilities. After consuming him, Heller learned that Blackwatch had secretly retained contaminated batches of white light for potential use as a biological weapon. James infiltrated the storage site and destroyed the containers. Mercer's Evolved arrived while he was doing so. It was another attempt to prevent him from interfering. They failed. Blacknet then identified Lieutenant McElroy. Heller consumed him and learned about a Blackwatch commander known as Rottweiler, a man openly eager to confront him. James accepted the challenge. He attacked Base India 69. Blackwatch responded with tanks, helicopters, and Project Orion soldiers. Heller destroyed them all. Rottweiler finally arrived in an armored vehicle. His confrontation with Heller ended quickly. With that operation finished, James finally met Sabrina. She immediately noticed that he had kept her waiting. Galloway provided the next piece of intelligence concerning Project Firehawk. Commander Cantrell was one of the key officers involved in the program. Cantrell's base had been placed under complete lockdown. Heller attacked it anyway. A massive explosion tore through the installation, igniting fuel storage tanks and collapsing the defensive perimeter. Cantrell fled aboard a helicopter. He did not get far. A flock of infected flyers struck the aircraft and brought it down. The pilot was killed. Cantrell survived inside the burning wreckage. Heller needed him alive long enough to learn what Project Firehawk actually was. As infected creatures converged on the crash site, James defended the commander. Then another Evolved appeared. A blonde woman armed with a massive organic whip fist. Mercer had sent her to capture Cantrell before Heller could reach him. She attacked James. Heller defeated and consumed her. The mutation transferred to him. Whipfist. His arm could now extend into a long bladed tendril capable of striking targets at range, dragging enemies toward him, and even pulling helicopters from the sky. When Cantrell attempted to escape again, Heller used his new ability to seize him. Then he consumed him. The commander's memories finally revealed Project Firehawk. Blackwatch intended to destroy all of New York Zero. The red zone would be hit first, then the yellow zone, then the green zone. A fleet of helicopters equipped with thermobaric weapons would systematically erase the city. Approximately 1.5 million uninfected civilians still lived inside NYZ. Blackwatch considered them acceptable losses. Sabrina provided another lead. Commander Ellis was one of Firehawk's primary coordinators. To reach him without raising suspicion, Heller consumed a Blackwatch pilot named Arnold Lincoln and took his place aboard the helicopter assigned to escort Ellis to a meeting with other senior officers. At first, the mission proceeded normally: routine escort formation, radio communications, standard military orders. Then the convoy was attacked in the air. 2 large groups of infected flyers descended on the helicopters. Heller cleared the sky. Immediately afterward, he received another assignment. A nearby Blackwatch base was under attack and required aerial reinforcement. James responded, destroyed the infected forces, and returned to the escort operation. Then, a distress signal came through. Ellis's helicopter had been brought down. Heller reached the crash site, eliminated the infected surrounding the wreckage, and protected the survivors while Blackwatch prepared a ground evacuation. Ellis was transferred into an APC. The remainder of the journey continued by convoy. When they reached the meeting site, Heller abandoned the operation. He consumed Ellis and the other senior officers connected to Firehawk. Their memories confirmed the worst. The operation would begin within 72 hours. Heller now had no choice. Project Firehawk had to be destroyed before Blackwatch could erase New York Zero. Meanwhile, Colonel Rooks uncovered another piece of information. James Heller had a daughter. Her full name was Amaya Allison Heller, and she was alive. She had been taken into custody by a federal agent named Barnes Griffin. The operation surrounding her appeared to involve agencies outside Blackwatch and Gentek. One name appeared in the classified records: PARIAH, Elizabeth Greene's son. The same child whose fate had remained largely unknown since the events at Hope. Griffin's current assignment was identified as Project, codename PARIAH. Heller located Griffin and followed the helicopter carrying him toward a Blackwatch installation. The escort appeared normal at first. Then 3 members of the Blackwatch team suddenly transformed. They were evolved. They abducted Griffin and fled. Their escape led directly toward Pennsylvania Station. Once again, everything seemed to return to the place where Blacklight had first been released. Heller followed them inside. The Evolved attacked. James killed them all. Griffin remained. Terrified, the agent insisted that he could lead Heller to his daughter. He knew exactly where Amaya had been taken. Heller consumed him. Griffin's memories revealed the truth. He had transferred Amaya into the custody of Dr. Carson, a Gentek researcher, and ordered that she be prepared for surgery. Heller had to reach her quickly. Sabrina contacted him again. She confirmed what he already knew about Project Firehawk, but Heller needed the operational details. The plan involved an entire fleet of helicopters fitted with thermobaric weapons. They would attack the red zone first, and then proceed through the remaining zones until New York Zero had been completely destroyed. Heller went to one of the launch sites. He hijacked a thermobaric helicopter and turned its weapons against the rest of the fleet. One aircraft after another was destroyed. Then he attacked the bunker containing the remaining thermobaric munitions. The stockpile detonated. Project Firehawk was finished. For the second time, Heller had prevented Blackwatch from destroying New York in the name of containment. Afterward, he met Sabrina again. With Firehawk eliminated, she made him an offer. Leave the city with her. Forget Mercer. Abandon Blackwatch, Gentek, and the war surrounding them. They could disappear together and build something of their own. Heller refused. His daughter was still missing, and his war with Mercer was far from over. He left Sabrina behind. Then he returned to Dana. James asked her for only one thing. If something happened to him, she had to take care of Amaya. There was no one else he trusted to do it. Dana did not ask questions. She simply agreed. That was enough. Heller had spent too long using Colonel Rooks as a source of information. Now it was time to deal with him directly. James tracked him down, but what he found was not what he expected.
Fine. Yeah. So how'd it go last night? No, that's great. And how's my little girl? I don't know. There's a lot of variables. Another 6 months, maybe. I know. I love you too.
Jesus Christ, Riley! You should wear a fucking bell!
Sorry. I've got an idea. Can you get a fix on a Dr. Trey Carson?
Carson works for a special bioweapons division out of Quantico. Where are you going with this?
If we can find Heller's daughter, that'd put his nuts in a vice, right? I heard somebody in Rattler 2 talking about a Dr. Carson. I think he's connected to Griffin.
So what? Going to lean on Carson? You got any idea what these government spooks can do to you?
How bad do you want Heller? I'll let you know when I turn up.
Using the information he had obtained, Heller infiltrated Dr. Carson's base. At almost exactly the same time, a Goliath approached the facility, shaking the ground with every step. The creature's rampage destabilized the structure, causing part of the ceiling above Carson to collapse and pin him beneath the debris. Heller found the scientist unable to escape and consumed him. Carson's memories revealed that Amaya was being prepared for removal from New York. She was not being evacuated for her own protection. Gentek intended to study her. Heller would not allow that to happen. Outside, the Goliath continued tearing through everything in its path. James confronted the creature, destroyed it, then assumed Carson's appearance and boarded the helicopter assigned to extract the scientist. The aircraft had barely left the area when Mercer's Evolved attacked. They were searching for Carson. Instead, they found Heller. During the confrontation, one of the Evolved revealed that Mercer had plans for Amaya, plans that did not include her father. Heller killed and consumed the attackers. Their memories revealed why Mercer wanted the girl. Amaya possessed an unusual resistance to the virus inherited from Heller's altered biology. Mercer wanted her genetic material for his plans, and he also intended to make James suffer by forcing him to watch what happened to his daughter. Then Colonel Rooks called. His voice was unusually cautious. He claimed to have new information about Amaya and ordered Riley to report to him. When Heller arrived disguised as the lieutenant, Rooks immediately kicked open the door and confronted him. Riley had repeatedly disappeared, ignored orders, and behaved suspiciously for too long. There was no reason to continue pretending. Heller abandoned Riley's appearance and revealed himself. He did not threaten Rooks. He did not shout. He spoke to him as one father speaking to another. James wanted only one thing: his daughter. He told Rooks to stay out of his way. He had no desire to kill him unless the colonel forced him to. Heller continued moving through the decaying remains of New York Zero, destroying one operation after another. He understood that reaching Mercer required dismantling the infrastructure supporting his evolved army. Only the final Blacknet operations remained. Heller began with Operation Long Horizon. His first target was Lindsay Benhurst, an escaped criminal convicted of 7 murders. When Heller found him, Benhurst revealed himself as evolved. Mercer's army was not composed solely of scientists, soldiers, or carefully selected candidates. Some of his followers were simply violent people given power. Heller defeated and consumed Benhurst. His memories exposed a plan by Mercer's evolved to hijack Blackwatch gunships and steal military munitions. James intercepted the operation. He destroyed the aircraft, recovered the cargo, and killed the remaining evolved involved in the theft. The intelligence gained from them led to Gentek virologist Dr. Lawrence Foster. At first glance, Foster appeared to be another ordinary researcher. He was not. When Heller approached, Foster revealed his viral abilities and summoned infected creatures to defend him. James destroyed the mutants, defeated Foster, and consumed him. The scientist's memories revealed something far worse. Gentek had been developing a new variant of Blacklight specifically designed to affect unborn children. 2 people were responsible for the research: a scientist named Dr. Van Diver and Blackwatch Commander Chapin. Both were connected to Mercer's evolved network. Heller infiltrated the facility, consumed Van Diver, and confronted Chapin. The commander revealed his evolved form when Heller attempted to consume him. James defeated him as well. The project ended with them. Meanwhile, Blackwatch was getting dangerously close to discovering Athena's location. Operation Stun Circuit gave Heller his next target: Lieutenant Garrison Pugh, one of the officers involved in tracking Dana. Heller found and consumed him. Pugh's memories revealed that Blackwatch had deployed specialized equipment capable of pinpointing Athena's position. The tracking system was being transported aboard a helicopter. Heller intercepted the shipment and destroyed the forces protecting it before Blackwatch could use the equipment against Dana. The investigation eventually led to McNabb, the man responsible for placing a bounty on Athena. Anyone who could locate or eliminate her stood to benefit. Commander Collins intended to claim that reward himself. Heller found him. Collins had badly underestimated his target. James killed him along with the remaining personnel involved in the hunt for Dana, bringing the operation to an end. Only one Blacknet dossier remained: Operation Clockwork. The final terminal identified Alexander Murray, a Gentek retroviral researcher involved in the development of next-generation viral programs. Heller located and consumed him. Murray's data exposed Project New Templar. The program's objective was targeted biological sterilization of impoverished sections of the American population. Red Crown Command soon transmitted an emergency request. 3 scientists connected to New Templar had become stranded in separate combat zones and required evacuation. Heller intercepted the transmission and took control of the rescue helicopter. Disguised as the assigned pilot, he collected all 3 scientists. During the return flight, they discussed their project and its purpose. Heller had already learned enough. He climbed to altitude, abandoned the helicopter, and left the scientists aboard as the aircraft fell toward the city. Project New Templar lost some of its principal researchers with them. The next part of Operation Clockwork concerned the capture of another Goliath. The operation failed when the creature broke loose. Heller confronted it, systematically crippled the enormous infected organism, and eventually consumed it. The final target was Elwood Pine. Heller located him in the middle of a battle between Blackwatch and the infected. Pine revealed himself as another evolved. He had been working directly with Mercer, helping develop new methods of deploying infected creatures against Blackwatch. Heller defeated and consumed him. The last Blacknet operation was complete. Dana had been watching Mercer's network closely. She told Heller that Alex was not merely assembling an army of infected followers. He was strengthening them. Gentek laboratories throughout the Red Zone were being used under the cover of legitimate research to cultivate increasingly dangerous mutations. Heller attacked one of those facilities. He infiltrated the laboratory, eliminated its commander, and seized control of the containment system. Then he opened every cell. The resulting chaos destroyed the specimens and much of the research surrounding them. Dana warned him that other facilities still existed. Heller intended to destroy every one of them until Mercer understood that his plan would not unfold uncontested. But only one objective truly mattered now: Amaya. The end was approaching. Heller returned to Dana's safe house and asked if she had discovered where his daughter was being held. Her channels had gone silent. Then a transmission suddenly appeared through BlackNet. Colonel Rooks. A live image of Amaya appeared on the screen. Rooks told Heller to come and take her. James immediately moved. Dana warned him that it was almost certainly a trap. The transmission had gone across BlackNet, meaning Mercer could have intercepted it as easily as Heller had. James did not care. He raced toward Gentek headquarters. He crossed the city at full speed and attacked the massive reinforced entrance protecting the building. Even his strength could not break through it. Then an alpha juggernaut emerged. Heller fought the creature and consumed it. The absorption expanded his control over the hive mind. He summoned 2 juggernauts of his own. The enormous creatures obeyed him. At Heller's command, they attacked the reinforced barricade and tore it apart. James entered Gentek headquarters. Colonel Rooks was waiting inside with 2 Blackwatch soldiers. Then the colonel made his decision. He shot both of his own men. Rooks stepped aside and allowed Heller to pass. He asked only one favor: take his daughter and leave the city. Rooks understood what Heller was fighting for, because he was a father himself. James continued forward. After believing Amaya dead for so long, he finally saw her again. She was alive, unharmed, standing only a short distance away. But Sabrina Galloway was behind her. A blade rested against Amaya's throat. Before Heller could reach them, she destroyed part of the wall and escaped with the girl. James had lost his daughter again. This time there would be no more distractions, no more BlackNet operations, no more Gentek scientists, no more Blackwatch commanders. Only Alex Mercer remained. Dana finally accepted what she had spent so long trying not to admit. Whatever now wore her brother's face was no longer the Alex she had once known. Alexander Mercer had died at Penn Station. She told Heller to do what had to be done. James went after him. Mercer waited for him in the Red Zone. He was surrounded by his remaining evolved, including Sabrina Galloway. Heller demanded his daughter back. Mercer instead revealed the final stage of his plan. He intended to infect humanity and transform it into a unified species, a new world without the divisions and weaknesses he believed had doomed mankind. Amaya was essential to that plan. Her unique genetic resistance made her the perfect foundation for what Mercer intended to create. He called her the Mother of the New World. The only remaining obstacle was James Heller. Mercer consumed his remaining evolved, including Galloway, absorbing their biomass and power into himself. Then the final battle began. Mercer attacked with the abilities he had accumulated throughout his existence: blade, whip fist, hammer fists. Every transformation was met by Heller's own evolved strength. Again and again, James countered him. When Mercer attacked with his blade, Heller severed his arm. Alex regenerated. He attacked again. Heller cut away another limb. Mercer continued changing weapons and regenerating, but each exchange weakened him further. Finally, James caught Mercer's hammer fists and tore both of his arms away. Alex fell to his knees. He could no longer regenerate fast enough to continue. Heller stood over his creator. Mercer looked up at him. James consumed him. An enormous amount of viral biomass entered Heller's body. Mercer's memories became his knowledge, his experiences, his connection to the infection. The sudden increase in power was overwhelming. Heller released a massive devastator. Tendrils erupted across the Red Zone, spreading through the streets and consuming infected biomass throughout Manhattan. The infected collapsed. The viral structures covering the city were destroyed. The second outbreak ended. Mercer's memories revealed where Amaya had been taken. Heller found the bank vault where Mercer had imprisoned both Amaya and Dana. His daughter was alive. When Amaya first saw what her father had become, she recoiled in fear. Heller lowered his eyes. Everything he had done had been for her. He had wanted only to save his daughter. But after everything Gentek, Blackwatch, Mercer, and the virus had done to him, he no longer knew whether she could still see the father she remembered. Later, Dana and Amaya stood together on a rooftop overlooking New York. The sun was rising. Heller began to walk away, believing there might no longer be a place for him in his daughter's life. Amaya stopped him. She approached her father, took his hand, and embraced him. For a moment, James remained still. Then he embraced her in return. The city had survived. Mercer was dead. The outbreak had ended. Dana looked toward the recovering city. What do we do now? That question became the final moment of the story. Remember, the best way to support the channel is by leaving a like and subscribing. I've also recently enabled channel memberships. As a token of my gratitude for your generous support, every member will be able to watch my videos a little earlier than everyone else. I'll be waiting for you in the Save Room archives. Thank you for watching, and may all the creepy stuff pass you by.